Good evening, everyone. The first round of the 108th Edward Lasker Memorial / 2024 Marshall Chess Club Championship is underway in New York City. My name is Luiz Henrique Coelho. I am a Chess International Master, FIDE rated 2401 from Brazil, and I will be your host throughout the event. We wanted to have started the first round, the coverage of the first round, a few minutes earlier. We had a couple of technical hiccups, but here we are. And I would like to begin with board number 2, where Andrew Tang is playing the black pieces against James Marsh, rated 2040. Listen, no disrespect to any of the other players in the tournament, but just the fact that the youngsters Andrew Tang and Brandon Jacobson are taking part in the event makes it so exciting. I knew Andrew Tang was going to participate, but I only knew that Brandon Jacobson had registered 24 hours before the tournament began, and I was super excited for it. 21-year-old Brandon Jacobson, for those who don't know who I'm talking about, that is an amazing sensation. He is rated very close to 2,600. He is the highest rated player in the tournament. He's actually higher rated than Andrew Tang himself. Andrew Tang has been playing amazing chess. I was really surprised by the fact that, despite the fact that he is quite the bullet player, and everyone who follows online blitz and bullet, the best players in the world, everybody knows who Andrew Tang is. He goes by the Penguin GM username, and he is incredibly fast, and his reflexes are simply amazing. But it's actually a different player when he's playing classical chess, because Andrew Tang takes his sweet time. You wouldn't imagine that for a bullet player. You wouldn't imagine that. You'd think a bullet player would not be very patient when the critical moments arise in classical chess, because that's what bullet chess does to you. You play too much bullet and blitz online. There's something about the quality and the depth of your game that gets lost in there somewhere. And that's the reality for most players. But it's not really what happens with Andrew Tang. In this game, we have d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6. And c takes d5, e takes d5. This is the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. And the most common move here, of course, is bishop e7 for black. This is going to, or c6, but basically whatever black does, that it's going to end up with the development of the dark squared bishop on e7. That means that black is taking the orthodox, old-fashioned, traditional way of playing this line, which is in no way bad. But, these days, in the era of modern chess, bishop b4 has become more and more popular, and that's what we call the Rogozin variation. And this is what was chosen by Andrew Tang. The Rogozin variation does add a little bit of spice to the Queen's Gambit declined. One of the main ideas is, due to the fact that this knight is spinned on this diagonal, sometimes black can go for h6, g5, and then knight to e4, which does weaken his kingside quite a bit, but at the same time allows black to fight for the initiative in a way that's by no means correct. And that's exactly what we've had here. After h6, bishop to h4, Andrew Tang has played g5. This is the most aggressive possible way for black to play this line, and this does not surprise me given the fact that Andrew Tang basically has 500 rating points over his opponent, and so playing for a win with the black pieces in round number one makes every sense in the world. After bishop g3, the game continues with knight e4. And James Marsh replies super quickly with the best possible move in the position, indicating that he's actually very well prepared. So we'll see what Andrew Tang is going to do now. White is sacrificing a pawn or two right now. This position is not very easy to understand, actually, because when you look at it for the first time, you would think that after knight takes c3, b takes c3, bishop takes c3, black has a good position because the rook on d4 and the pawn on d4 are under attack, but that's actually not the case, because after rook c1, not just the bishop but the pawn on c7 gets under attack as well, and this is very annoying for black here. And I don't think that Andrew Tang is going to accept the pawn sacrifice. I'm going to take a look at the opening book here for a moment, just to try to remind myself on which of these two captures here is the most common, because black is going to do one of these two right now. And yes, knight takes g3 is the most common move. While taking on c3 is playable as well. But these lines, they get ridiculously difficult. And engine analysis becomes so important here. So it basically goes like this. After knight takes c3, bishop takes, attacks the rook and plays rook to c1. Black plays the bishop to b2, attacking the rook. This gets so crazy. We have bishop takes c7, queen to e7, bishop to d6, attacking the queen and the bishop on c8 at the same time. And then black plays the queen to e6, protecting the bishop while keeping the bishop on d6 under attack as well. And I have never studied this line deeply in my life, but there is no doubt, just looking at it, that this is for the engines. This is for the engines, absolutely. And so after knight d2, it is a more solid choice for black to go knight takes g3. That is going to allow white to open up the h file for the rook, for sure, after knight takes g3 there, after h takes g3. And then black typically proceeds with c6, and we have a way calmer game. So it is up to Andrew Tang to decide right now on move 9, on basically how sharp of a battle he wants against a player that's rated 500 rating points below him. Both moves are good, and they're going to lead to radically different types of middle games. I don't think he's going to play knight takes c3 unless he's really confident in his preparation, because the game simply gets way too wild. I believe he's going to play knight takes g3. That's what I think he's going to do. We'll see if I am right here or not. But the reason I think he's going to make this move is it just makes sense, and it's quite the trend nowadays when grandmasters play young, up-and-coming, still lower-rated opponents, that they will try to take the engine out of the game and force the opponent to think for himself. And playing knight takes g3 simply leads to positions where there's less tactics, there is less chaos, and it's probably a better suited ground for a stronger player to try to slowly outplay his opponent in the middle game, as opposed to going for sharp tactics right off the bat. So that's board number 2, where Andrew Tang is playing black against James Marsh. We have quite the interesting opening in board number 1, and Brandon Jacobson is playing white against Luke William Hoffman. And take a look at what we have here. After c4 with the Queen's Gambit, instead of playing the Queen's Gambit decline with e6, or the Slav defense with c6, or even the Queen's Gambit accepted with d takes c4, maybe even the Alban counter gambit with e5. Instead of any of those, black plays c5 here. This is a very, very rare move. It's not fully incorrect, but it's not regarded as the best move for black either here. I don't think this move will ever catch on. It will ever catch on. It's a little bit of a provocation, actually. So what black is attempting to do, amongst other things, is this. If white plays d takes c5, then black will have the opportunity to push d4, and this is what black wants. If black can play d4 and e5, and then bishop takes c5, then black does have a pretty good position there. So let's say here, for example, let me play the opening poorly for white. So the knight attacks the pawn, the knight defends it, and then white just fianchettos the light squared bishop, and we have something like this. So this is a fantastic position for black, and this diagram right here is what black wants when he plays c5. This is what black wants. We are in, King Carl girl. We are in. This is just the first round. We're going to have 7. We have basically 9 hours of chess per day on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Of course, for today, just round number 1. The round started at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We should have about a 4.5 hour broadcast for each of the rounds. So this one should go up until more or less 11:30 Eastern Time. The Sly 9, always with us, dear student of mine who became a pretty good friend, one of the funniest guys in the world. No, you fianchetto your bishop. White should play c takes d5 instead, Sly. And this is what was done by Brandon here. We have c takes d5, and then knight to f6, and then pawn to e4. I really love this move. You can't catch anyone by surprise these days in the openings, right? The level of opening prep today is simply amazing. Well, I mean, Brandon Jacobson is a 2600 level player. So whatever you throw at him, he will know how to respond. He will absolutely know how to respond. But there is just no way, guys, that anybody without serious training on this line will ever play e4 just because he felt like it. Oh, I'm going to play e4. I'm going to give up this pawn. The knight can take it, and then my 2 central pawns are isolated just because I feel like it. It's just like spur of the moment kind of thing. Nobody does that. Nobody does that kind of thing. And Brandon Jacobson, I'm going to presume that it did not take him long to make this move. Yeah, it took him about 4 minutes, though. It took him about 4 minutes. So he might have been remembering his prep here, because he did not play it instantly. So this move, e4, I consider it to be not only the best possible way to play against this c5. I don't even know if this has a name. Does this have a name? I don't know the name. I don't know the names to everything in chess openings nowadays, because the King Cargill mentioning that excited to see Miles Hinson and Joseph Otero shark it up today. So the idea behind e4, White is saying, listen, I am going to give the pawn back. I want the pawn on d5. This is what this move says. White is saying, I love this pawn. And you can't play knight c6 because of it. You can't play bishop b6 because of it. And it's harder for you to play e6 because of it. And since I'm going to have to give back my pawn, how about I keep the one on d5? I play e4 and you get this one instead. It's a great move. I did some training with a dear student of mine a couple of months ago on this line. And it's just a nightmare for Black. Black has to play very accurately in order to come out of the opening with a slightly inferior position only. So, I mean, look, William Hoffman is not afraid of mixing it up with a 2600 level grandmaster in classical play. So we have to give him that. It's the first time I see him play, but we already have to give him that. But we'll see, you know, how deep his prep goes, because it's not a great variation for Black. It's not definitely a mistake either, but it's not that great of a line. It's not that great of a line. This line 9 is a guy who really has, he really enjoys the crazy names we give to opening lines these days in chess, and we like to fool around. So, oh, that's the Archangel's Uncle's face-off variation. So the double Queen's Gambit. Oh yeah, Grandmaster Alexei Bizgodov wrote a whole book. That's very, very true. My dear friend and student Sarathi Ray. I had completely forgotten about that book, Sarathi. That is true. That is true. There is an entire book written by a grandmaster on c5 here. On c5. So it belongs to that category of chess openings that, you know, when something is not completely wrong, but it's not completely right either. And then there's that weird gray line that nobody really knows how exactly it should be assessed. That's what this opening is. That's what this opening is. The best argument for Black is, hey, this is not fully wrong, okay? This is not completely wrong. And then the best argument for White is, yeah, it's not fully right either now, is it? Because I'm playing White, so I have the initiative. I know how this game works. I know what the rules are. So it's my prerogative to play c4 and play the Queen's Gambit. I gambit you. And why are you re-gambiting me instead of defending yourself? If you're playing Black, you're supposed to defend with e6 or defend with c6, or at least take my pawn, for crying out loud. c5 is a counter-attacking move. Listen, it might be too early for me to say this, but I think, look, William Hoffman picked the wrong guy to play this against. Picked the wrong guy to play this against. Sounds like the description of your life. So your life is not completely right, but not completely wrong either. Okay, I didn't see that one coming. So c takes d5. So I did some training in this opening, as I mentioned, a couple of months ago. And this is a critical position. This is the most important diagram. Black needs to decide if he's going to recapture the pawn with knight f6 or with queen takes d5. So it's basically it. And queen takes d5 is completely playable. And the pawn on d4 is being attacked twice. So I'm not going to play knight c3 to attack the queen now, because I would lose the d4 pawn. So first I protect it with knight c3 and then with knight f3, and then I want to play knight c3 next. So Black plays c takes d4, and before taking on d4, the reason why White's going to get an advantage in development is because White can gain a pretty precious tempo by playing knight c3 first, attacking the queen. The queen is hanging. If d takes c3, queen takes d5, Black would be completely lost. So the queen generally is moved to a5, and white plays knight takes d4. And after knight f6, pawn to g3 and bishop to g2 and kingside castling, white, despite the fact that we have a pretty symmetrical pawn structure, white's position is better due to quicker development and the fact that both knights are already developed. The development is faster, and black needs to demonstrate that his position is reliable enough on account of the symmetrical pawn structure. But once again, not completely wrong, but not completely right either. So the fact that Luke William decided to play knight f6, listen, I'm going to look up his FIDE profile. Might we assume that it's a very young kid? And let's see. Well, nowadays we just assume that it's a very young kid, right? Hey, oh, there's this guy playing board number 1 against a grandmaster. Oh, must be some young kid. I don't know. I don't know. But I know this. Luke William Hoffman wants to go after Grandmaster Brendan Jacobson today. It's one of those things where, what do you get to lose, right? If you lose the game, you lost it to a 2600 Grandmaster with the black pieces, and at least you can tell all of your chess buddies the tale of how you went after him. People are going to play, wow, a 2600 GM? You played very solidly, right? Because he went after you, and then what did you play? Queen's Gambit declined. What did you defend your position with? Nah, he played d4, d5, c4. I played c5. That's what I did. Nah, you didn't. I did. I played c. I don't care who he is. I don't care. I played c5. I said, bring it. Chess players love to tell these stories to their friends, to such an extent that when they feel they're going to lose to someone, sometimes they will actually play extra aggressively on purpose, just because they don't want to come back to their chess buddies and tell the tale of how they lost a dull technical game. They at least want to say, hey, I had me some fun, man. I really went after him, and I showed him that I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. You did lose though, right? Yeah, I did. That's usually how those stories end. Hey, I'm not trying to jinx it for Hoffman, okay? But that's usually how these stories end. So d takes c5, queen a5 check, and knight to d2. So queen a5 check is the best move for black here. Black can play knight takes c5, no problem. But the whole thing is, the pawn on d5 is strong. The pawn on d5 is strong. That's it. Why is white better? Because the pawn on d5 is strong. Take c6 from the knight, take c6 from the bishop, make it, this diagonal is a little bit exposed, and black is probably reduced to fianchettoing the dark squared bishop, but g6 cannot be played because queen d4 forces black to resign. Actually, it doesn't force black to do anything. Black may not resign if he doesn't wish to, but he should. And so after knight c3, it is a challenge for black to finish the development, and black usually tries to play e6. But it's just that white's pieces are developed very well here. After c takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop to c4, white usually grabs a type of initiative that is based on quicker development and more active pieces. And up until move 5, every step of the way, Luke William plays the most aggressive move. You see? Because when c4 is played, he can play e6 or c6, but no, he plays c5. That's more aggressive. Now, queen takes d5 is way more conservative. Knight f6 is more chaotic, and he goes for knight f6. And now, after d takes c5, knight takes c5 is quieter, but he goes for the sharpest move again. It's very clear that he is in the mindset of, hey, I'm going to have me some fun. I have a 2600 GM in front of me. I am not going to miss out on the opportunity to have some fun. Okay? And so we're going to go to board number 3 quickly. After queen a5 check, by the way, according to all the training that I did, bishop d2 is the best move for white, but Brendan immediately played knight to d2. I have never seen this move before. But he played it so quickly that this has to be book. Give me just a moment, you guys. Just having fun. Grandmaster A Wonder Liang is playing Leela in a night odds match. Oh, the good old days when the chess grandmasters would give material odds to the poor chess computers who can't play chess. Now it's the opposite. I was astounded. I said, what? A grandmaster is playing against the computer? And the computer is giving material odds to the grandmaster? Yes. Welcome to 2024. Welcome to 2024. And a competitive muffin diver is here with us. This is awesome. King Call Girl. Oh, that's an awesome comment there. Nice to see. Nice to see that. Nice to see that comment as well. Okay, guys. So this is how I understand this line, and I am looking at something I've never seen before, because when I studied this line, it was pretty clear to me that bishop d2 was the best move. And the first idea is that queen takes c5 is a horrible move for black. So let's kick off the questions to the audience in this tournament. Why is queen takes c5 so bad? That's really bad. Why is that so bad? Because of queen a4 check. There you go, Muffin Diver. Black would lose the knight. So black has to play knight takes d2. It's the absolute only move. And then when we play queen takes d2, we're up a pawn. We're up a pawn. And so we would love it if black would just go ahead and trade the queens. But black instead goes ahead and captures this pawn. And then if we could play rook c1, we would win that bishop. So the knight is developed to a3, not c3. That's the key. So rook c1 is being threatened when that bishop is hanging. And this knight, in several lines, it can go to b5 or c4. And this is how white gets an advantage here. Black can play a move like bishop to d7, so the bishop is not lost. But then we have rook to c1, and the queen kind of has a shortage of good squares to go to, because if queen d6, there's knight c4. And so that's basically it. I have not studied this very, very deeply, but I recalled checking with the engines on whether this position is better for white, and the verdict is that yes, it was better for white. So it might be the case that Brendan Jacobson did not know about this, that bishop d2 is the best move. He had already spent 16 minutes on his clock, and maybe he just decided to play knight d2 during the game. Oh, knight. Oh, the sly 9. Always thinking about playing a3. Chess players in our favorite moves. The sly 9, student of mine, any chance he gets, he wants to play a3. Well, if we could play a3 and then b4, those would be awesome. 2 moves in a row to play. Muffin Diver was asking about bishop d7. Let me just see. Knight d7, Muffin Diver, was that the question? Knight d7, and then rook to c1. And I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but if we are, still looks unpleasant, right? Because anytime the queen goes to b6 or d6, the knight goes to c4, and there goes another tempo. Just a weird position to play as black. But knight d2 is played. Instead, I'm going to check this with the opening book and with the engines here. But I'm pretty sure bishop d2 is the only move that gives white a sure advantage. Okay, yeah, so I have the engines on in a separate screen. And knight d2 is slightly inaccurate. And black has no problems after e6. That's a hard move to find if you don't know about it. But this move expedites black's development, and bishop takes c5, attacking f2 quickly, gives black a lot of counterplay. And it looks like from the engine evaluation here that white needs to be careful not to get into a worse position. So we can say for sure that Brendan Jacobson made a slight inaccuracy with knight d2, and that bishop d2 is the correct way to go. And black's reply of knight takes c5 was slightly inaccurate, and there's one move that gives white an advantage. And what do you know? I was talking about my student, the sly 9. He wants to play a3 every chance he gets, and the only move that gives white an advantage is the sly 9 special. A3 with the idea of b4. Going for the fork here, this is going to force black to lose more tempi in development, and then white is going to fianchetto his dark squared bishop with tempi. And this, so if a3 is played by Brendan Jacobson, he will get an opening advantage. Kramnik found e6 interesting. Joking about the interesting part. It's what is Vladimir Kramnik doing, right, guys? What is Vladimir Kramnik doing? Vladimir Kramnik has gone so wild in the last couple of years that whenever I look at his great, brilliant victories, like from the 1990s and from the early 2000s, it's almost like those amazing wins have been slightly tarnished by his wild behavior of today. So that's all I'm going to say about that. That there's, you know, I used to be a huge fan of his, but you know, in my personal opinion, so this is not the Martial Chess Club speaking. This is just their streamer speaking. This is just my personal opinion. You know, he, with all of this engine talk and going way overboard on that type of stuff, he does not show, let's say, a behavior that's compatible and akin to what a former world champion should be behaving. It has personally affected my how much I have admired him and his games throughout my career. But certainly, he's still a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant man. It's like when they asked Bobby. I love Bobby Fischer, you know, one of my favorite chess characters of all time. And they asked Bobby once, "Hey, Bobby, you are a genius of a chess player, right? And Bobby was offended. He's like, what did you just say? Well, you're a genius chess player. No, I'm a genius who happens to play chess. Okay? Respect. Vladi is taking pages from WWE scripts. The Sly 90s. Hey, as a world champion myself, let me weigh in on the topic. Yeah, competitive muffin diving. I agree with you. Brendan is an extremely strong player. Certainly not a perfect one, but extremely, extremely strong. And he played the most natural move of the position. Knight d2 feels more natural than bishop d2 there. It's like, excellent comment by Muffin Diver there, guys. So he's talking about like, so this position, bishop d2 is slightly stronger than knight d2. But bishop d2, giving up the dark squared bishop, is the type of move, giving up the bishop pair in an open position. This is the type of move that you will play when you really know what you're doing, when you really know the why. Knight d2 instead is the move that you'll play just because that's what people do. People preserve their bishop there early on in the game in positions that have a bit more of an open character like this one. Okay, but we've only been talking about Brendan Jacobson and Andrew Tang up to this point. Let's talk about Kamrakulov a little bit. Kamrakulov has a huge advantage on the clock. He's playing against the candidate master Chen Xuan Ling. Of course, this being the first round of a Swiss event, we're always going to have a huge rating difference between the highest rated players and their opponents. Kamrakulov always plays e4, but he decides not to go for his trademark Alapin this time. He decides not to go for the Alapin. Of course, the Alapin variation of the Sicilian defense is when white plays c3, and I have called many Kamrakulov Alapins, and it's actually an uncommon sight when he plays against the Sicilian and he doesn't go for the Alapin. It's actually uncommon. Yeah, but he's not going for the Alapin right now. He's going for the close. So we have knight c3, knight c6, bishop to b5, knight to d4, and knight to f3. So this quick bishop b5 move is a slight modification on the well-trodden paths of the Grand Prix Sicilian. The Grand Prix Sicilian is when white plays f4 first, g6, knight f3, bishop to g7, and then white chooses between bishop c4 or bishop to b5. Bishop b5 has a better reputation of being a bit stronger than bishop c4. And then Dutch Grandmaster Sergei Tivyakov devised this kind of like accelerated way of playing the Grand Prix, where you don't commit to playing f4, you just play the bishop to b5 first. So that's kind of like a hybrid between the Grand Prix and the Rossolimo. Of course, the Rossolimo is when white plays knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. This is the Rossolimo variation. And so the Tivyakov Grand Prix is some hybrid form of approaching the white side of the Sicilian, where it's half Rossolimo, half Grand Prix. Knight to d4 is the main move for black, and white very willingly gives up the light squared bishop with knight f3. That's very, very common. e4 is best by test. That is Bobby Fischer talk. I don't agree with it. I have tested both e4 and d4, and after many, many years, I've actually grown fond of playing d4 more than e4. And I disagree with Bobby. But somehow, I don't think that Bobby would take my opinion very seriously. If Bobby were here, hey, Bobby, Luis was doing a stream, and you know the whole e4 best by test thing? He doesn't really agree with it. Then wait for Bobby's reply. I don't think he would say something nice. I don't think he would say something nice. Oh, so maybe I should rewrite my book then. Luis doesn't agree with me. First of all, who is that guy? Oh, he's just an international master from Brazil. Oh, not even a GM? And he criticized me, and you're bringing his comment to me? Oh. Okay. So maybe the discussion would start there. And I don't know how it would end, but probably not well. So knight takes b5, a6, and pawn to d6. So why is white giving up the bishop pair so early? Well, development. After d4, c takes d4, and queen takes d4, there's no knight on c6 to attack the queen here, so the queen is well placed in the middle of the board, and black needs to decide if he's going to play e5 or not. It's hard not to, actually, because let's assume black doesn't want to play e5. Let's assume black goes e6, kingside castling. If this bishop moves, the pawn on g7 hangs. And I'm going to play a move like rook to e1, and e5 ideas are available to me all the time here. This is unpleasant for black. So pushing e5, which does weaken the d5 square permanently, is actually pretty playable. It has been played by Ling here. This is not fully incorrect because white does not have a light squared bishop. This move would be very bad if white had a light squared bishop here on b3, attacking this diagonal, targeting the f7 pawn, and completely dominating the d5 square. The reason why black can play e5 and get away with it is that black has a light squared bishop and white doesn't. So that means the weakness of the d5 square, you know, black can shore up that weakness by playing the bishop to e6 and the knight to f6, and d5, yeah, it's not a pleasant situation that black is going to have to watch out for the domination and occupation of that square the entire game, but it's playable. And then Kamrakulov instantly plays the queen to b4, showing amazing opening prep here. This is the best possible move for white. A genius who is good at chess wouldn't take you seriously. Yeah, I don't think I don't think there's any single version of Bobby who would take any international master's opinion seriously. So this queen is placed on the same diagonal as the dark squared bishop here, and white wants black to play d5, attacking the queen, because then we'll play the queen to b3 here. And if d takes e4, we have knight takes e5, threatening a checkmate on f7. And bishop e6 loses the b7 pawn, and then there's queen c6 check, and black is in a lot of trouble. And if d4 is played, well, then the knight just goes to d5, and this is a great square for the knight. And white has a positional advantage here as well. Interesting. So this is what I'm looking at in a different board, just because I'm thinking about, is it possible? Is it possible that instead of knight d5, maybe we could play knight g5 here? So that would threaten a checkmate in one on f7. Yeah, that's probably even stronger. That's probably even stronger because if the queen goes to c7 or e7 to protect f7, then this knight goes to d5, gaining a tempo. Right? And if black instead plays the bishop to e6, well, the knight is there to take it. So that's probably even worse. But d5 was not played by Ling. He played knight to e7. So the name Ling, it sounds a little bit, and it's spelled a little bit like a certain player from China who used to be the chess champion of the world until 24 hours ago. What happened to Ding Liren today, guys? What happened to Ding Liren? After Ding Liren's win on game number 12, I'm like, okay, Ding, is all there, like mentally and emotionally, and he's locked in, and his back, and all of that. And then we saw what happened. A very, very elementary pawn endgame. I mean, elementary for a 2700 level player. And he completely misevaluates it. And we should have gone to the tie breaks, and then he just loses in classical chess. What happened to Ding? Muffin Diver saying, yeah, the knight goes to d5 anyways. And that's it. That sums it up. After 97, we actually have a few more moves. So we've had bishop to e3, knight to c6, trying to gain a tempo. The queen goes to b3, and knight to a5. Of course, if the bishop goes to e6 instead, white's just going to play the knight to d5. So the bishop there is never really a problem. Knight a5 looks very strong. Knight a5 looks quite strong. Ling is putting Komrakulov on notice that he's aware that his queen is slightly exposed on the queen side and that he intends to take advantage of it. And Komrakulov replies with queen b6. Komrakulov is a great endgame player, and he's a guy who doesn't really mind playing long games, and he just he uses his creativity and his technique to try to find holes and ways to win the game in any way that he can. Like, if the best possible way to go for a win is to go for the end game, he's gonna go for it. He's not that type of player who will go, oh, I'm higher rated than you, I don't want to trade the queens. No, what he really doesn't want is to allow lower rated players to get draws without a huge fight. So he's a fighter, and he's like, if you're not high rated enough, you're gonna have to prove yourself to me, because I am going to use everything that I've got to try to outplay you in any phase of the game. And so knight c4 was black's response here, attacking the queen, the b2 pawn, and the bishop on e3. And we've had queen takes d8, check, and bishop goes back to c1, which looks pretty strong. Yeah, looks pretty strong because white's going to play b3 and expel the knight anyway. And then white is hoping that the open d file with the weakness of the d6 pawn, black's king in the middle of the board, and the d5 square, these elements combined are going to give him a lasting positional advantage, and he's probably not wrong. Yeah, after the queen, I was Sarathi. I was asking myself the same thing. I I don't know if you're talking about black playing queen takes b6 first instead of knight c4. I was thinking about the same thing. Yeah, yes. So Sarathi is asking about, what about this? Well, it's certainly going to be knight d5. It's certainly going to be knight d5. There's nothing else for white. There's nothing else. So we play the knight to d5 first and think later. And then probably black's going to play knight takes b6 too. There's probably nothing else for him either. Knight takes b6. We're not going to play knight c7 check because since the rook is protected by the knight, we would be giving up two minor pieces for the rook, and that would not be a good idea. So we would play knight takes b6 instead, and the rook would have to go to b8. So we have a bunch of forced moves there, right? So two knights versus two bishops. Who's better? Certainly not the two bishops. So this is either equal or white is a bit better because the worst minor piece on the board belongs to black. Black's dark squared bishop is very bad. White should have some advantage here because it's not just about the d5 square. We also have c4 for this knight and d5 for the other. Typically, black wants to have the ability to play b5 to take the c4 square away, but that's not possible here. So white can possibly go a4 and a5 first, and then one knight goes to c4, the other one goes to d5, and that is amazing coordination for those knights on the queen side. And so white's going to have two good minor pieces. Black's going to have one good minor piece with the light squared bishop and one bad minor piece with the dark squared bishop. Muffin Diver asking, are there enough pieces to gang up on d6? And with a knight that can go to c4 plus two rooks that can double up on the d file, the answer is still definitely yes. Definitely yes. So we're probably talking about some bishop e6, a4, and white is a bit better. Not by much either, right? Black's position should be pretty solid. Knight c4 though was played, and so we have a completely different. So this is completely different, right? The reality of queen takes b6 first, followed by knight c4, rather than play knight c. Two completely different moves. Let's see how long it took Ling to make this decision. 6 minutes. That's good enough. 6.5 minutes. Sounds about right. I'm just wondering if this is in any way doable. Is this too crazy, allowing the pawns to get doubled up like this? Because then the f file is open. d6 is weak. Knight takes c5 is a threat. If the king goes to c7, knight d5 check comes with a gain of tempo. Probably f6. After which this bishop is super bad, but these pawns are no prize either. This is not horrible. Because sometimes chess is not about me having pieces on great squares and having sound, healthy pawns versus you doing the same thing. Sometimes high-level chess is about, let me get an ugly position, so you have to do something that will ugly your position up as well. And let's see who has the less ugly position, given the fact that we both have ugly positions. Who's less ugly? Sometimes the less ugly wins. Black goes f6. Muffin dive. After f6 here. I don't know if your question is about this exact diagram, Muffin Diver, f6 here, but because if f6 is certainly okay, but if g5 is played, then this pawn becomes a target because the f file is wide open. So probably f6 yes, and g5 no, because f6 can become a weakness, and if white ever lands a knight on f5. It would benefit black to have the ability to kick that knight out with g6. And playing g5, g4 would deprive black of that. So bishop c1 was probably the right thing to do. So we've had bishop e6, b3, knight b6. And bishop to e3 attacks the knight as well. It goes back to d7, and we have queenside castling. Queenside castling is awesome because after rook c8 attacking the knight, yes, Komarakulov does not need to move the knight yet. He can just play the king to b2 and defend it. And so we've had h6 to fend off any knight g5 threats there. I think Komarakulov is satisfied with this position because nowadays, even if you're a grandmaster and you've got like 400 rating points on your opponent, everybody's well prepared in the openings, and there's no such thing as getting huge advantages against the lower rated players anymore, just because everybody's studying chess, everybody's taking the game seriously, and anybody rated over 2,000 FIDE is usually a very well prepared player in the openings. And it's not uncommon, guys, nowadays that an 1800 FIDE rated player will just make like the first 10 moves at 3000 level, before we get into the middle game. So that's just the reality of today's chess. So does that mean you should not study openings anymore? No. You should study the openings and you should take it seriously, but at the same time, you should not rely and depend upon opening advantages anymore. If you do get an opening advantage, awesome. But you should be an expert in the typical middle games of your favorite openings, and you should be very much willing to engage in a long, tense, balanced middle game battle with your opponent, just to demonstrate who understands the typical middle games better. So chess has really become about depth of understanding of typical positions. Okay, so that's what's going on with Komarakulov's game. Let's take a look at Mykola Bortnik. I was in previous streams always pronouncing his first name Mykola, and I was talking to Marshall Chess Club representative who was helping me out before the stream. I was like, hey, do you guys in New York, do you say Mykola or Mykola? Like, oh, we say Mykola. Like, okay. So, I used to say Mykola. We're gonna go with Mykola now. Mykola played the Baltic defense. That's no good. Misha, exactly. Just go Misha. There you go. That solves everything. Well, I don't speak any Russian, but Misha sounds like such a term of endearment to me that I don't think I can call him Misha either. Like, I'm not close enough to him. Knight c3 and oh no c take Lev Schengen did not play c takes d5. Guys, bishop f5 is not a good move. That's not a good move. The Baltic defense, in my opinion, is worse than the c5 move that Luke William Hoffman played against Brandon Jacobson. Bishop f5 is not a good move. Certainly Bortnik. No, I mean, Bortnik is a guy. If you've seen his games, if you followed our previous broadcasts here, Bortnik is a guy who, in his attempt to play for a win with both colors against opponents that are lower rated than him, he will run very serious risks, and he is very much capable of playing moves that are subpar, and he will do them on purpose because he just wants to take the opponent out of book, and he wants to force the opponent to think for himself, and he wants complicated positions, and he wants the game to become a battle of improvisation by both players, and he is willing to bend the bar to ensure that happens. In my personal opinion, playing bishop f5 is a bit too much because c takes d5 is simply a refutation here. So the idea is that after queen takes d5, knight c3 already gains a tempo there, but black plays bishop takes b1 so that we don't have knight c3. That's what black usually plays, and white replies with queen a4 check. This queen a4 check move here is the refutation of the Baltic gambit. Black cannot get an equal position here. One of the main lines goes c6, rook takes b1, queen takes d5. And one of the ideas behind queen a4 check is that black would like to develop the knight to c6 and castle queenside right after. And that possibility is not there anymore. And so the game typically continues with knight f6 and pawn to e3, followed by bishop to d3, pawn to a3, pawn to b4, queen to c2, pawn to e4 later. White has the pawn center, and white has the bishop there. And to be perfectly frank, I don't get why Bortnik would go for this. Just because, I mean, it's okay to speculate with the black pieces when you really want to win, but it's usually a better idea to do it with lines that give you more of a chance to play for the initiative or for counterplay as black, and the Baltic is not that. The Baltic is not only speculative, but also leads to positions that very commonly black does not have a whole lot to play for. So I personally disagree with Bortnik in a very broad general sense, in that I don't think he should have this in his repertoire. Yeah, Muffin Diver is mentioning white gets everything you could ever want for free. Complicating the game, fine. Speculating, fine. Playing offbeat stuff, fine. But do it in a way that, you have more of a trade-off, and that the risk-reward ratio works in such a way that if things work out well for you, you have more dynamic positions to play as black, and the Baltic is not that. But luckily for Bortnik, his opponent did not play c takes d5. And white is just playing the game as if we have a very regular Queen's Gambit declined, in which case black is doing just fine. So knight c6, of course, creates the possibility of knight to b4, followed by knight c2 check. That's on the menu there. and white has played a3, and we've had knight to f6, bishop to g5, and bishop to e7. E3 and kingside castling. So white has the possibility to win a pawn now, but it's probably not a good idea. It's probably not a good idea. Because if bishop takes f6, queen to b3, which attacks d5 and b7 at the same time. Then knight e7 protects d5, which is the more important of the two pawns, being a central pawn. Queen takes b7, rook b8, queen takes a7, and rook takes b2. So white is up a pawn here, but it doesn't look good, right? Black has the bishop pair, and black has a rook on the 7th rank, and white does not even have the ability to castle yet. And black can probably continue with queen d6, followed by doubling the rooks on the b file. And yeah, probably not a very good idea to go for this. And Lev Schengen did not go for this. So he played the bishop. Oh, he's playing the opening like in the most basic way, which is no diss on him. Actually, if he really was taken by surprise by a strong opponent, it does make sense to make things simple. And bishop d3 is by no means a mistake. There's no way Bortnik is unhappy with trading his theoretically bad bishop. But there is also no way black is worse. There is the possibility of playing bishop takes f6 followed by queen b5 now, but that's definitely not good. Because if bishop takes f6, queen to b5, then there's knight takes d4. So this is why Bortnik played the rook to e8. So let me share something with you guys. When I started studying chess like super seriously when I was 15, 16 years old, so I did not have a lot of resources to study chess back then. I didn't have a coach, and the chess engines, they were very incipient, and they were nowhere near as reliable as today's engines. So I had to spend a lot of time just like sitting at the board and just thinking. And I would sometimes meditate for hours in diagrams that would puzzle me. And one thing that I did back then without any guidance, and I did not realize that was amazing training. And I would like to share that with you guys. Whenever you can, guys, look at games from tournaments like without any engine analysis and without any analysis whatsoever by strong human players either. So you just look at the games raw. So let's say, there's the Vacanzee tournament in the Netherlands. Okay, today was round number 5. So we've had 7 amazing games. Anish Giri had black against Firouzja. Okay, so you put that game over the board, over an actual chess set, and without any analysis on it, just spend a couple of hours on it on your own. I found that this method not only develops the depth of thinking of your play a lot, but also how useful it can be for us to simply grasp what that grandmaster was thinking. And this was a huge thing for me back then. I was a huge fan of like Vishyanon and Vasily Ivanchuk and Vasilin Topalov and Alexei Shirov. And I would look at their games, Judith Polgar, Vladimir Kramnik. I would look at their games deeply and deeply and deeply. And sometimes I would, through that process, I even found instructive how their mistakes were. So this is the point I want to make here. There's something instructive about the mistakes that very strong players will make. Because very often you would see, for example, a Judith Polgar game where she would lose to Vishyanon. Okay, and then you look at the game and it would be like the key mistake that Judith will make along that game was actually a fantastic idea that didn't work because of one tempo. It didn't work because of one tempo. And you know, nowadays we have so much high level information just simply being spoon fed to us, and so often we look at a game that has already been thoroughly analyzed, and the first thing we do is we look at the mistake, and there's a question mark, and everybody's saying that's wrong, and that's wrong because of this and that, and you did not even have time to think for your own. And then nowadays we're missing how precious it is to understand that when a great player makes a mistake, very often there was a fantastic idea behind it that just did not work because of one tempo. It was just a tempo factor. It was just simple tactics, but the strategy was all there. So this is a little bit of a rant just to, I'm an old guy now. I'm 43 years old, and I realize that I am old school, and the way I approach the game, the way I approach my training back then, I mean, it's pretty outdated, but there are certain things about how chess training used to be done back in the 80s and 90s that I believe would greatly benefit the modern players of today. So it's not really about not utilizing the engines and the databases and all the great courses and videos and the YouTube channels and all of, you know, the splendid resource that we have today. It's not about that. It's about keep doing all of the modern stuff that works, but try to blend it with all the old school formulas that are still helpful. So it's just about that. So on that note, when Bortnik plays a rook to e8, what is he thinking? What is he thinking? Well, he wants the rook on the same file as the opponent's king. So if bishop takes f6, he plays bishop takes f6, then the knight and the bishop are attacking the pawn on d4, and the e file is problematic while the white king is there. So if you study lots of games by high-level players and you take your sweet time going move by move trying to fully understand it, it becomes really easy, almost automatic to understand these types of things. So for example, when I saw rook e8, I understood instantly that this is not just he's just developing the rook. No, he's putting the rook on the e file because the white king is there. Because after bishop takes f6, he wants to be able to reply with bishop takes so that the pawn on d4 hangs after queen b5. So the move, you start realizing that high-level players make moves that might look generic, but they are or can be way more specific than it might look at first. So bishop takes f6 was not played. Schengen understood what was going on and he castled, and now black replied with knight to e4. Yes. So bishop takes e7 was no, it was not bishop takes, it was bishop to f4. So there's a little bit of a trap by Bortnik here that his opponent would never ever fall for, because when knight e4 is played here, knight takes e4 is a huge mistake because d takes e4 forks the queen and the knight, and when the queen takes the pawn, bishop takes g5, picks up the bishop while gaining a tempo on the queen, and so black has won a piece and white is lost. Lev Shangan decided not to trade the bishops on e7. He played the bishop to f4, and it was pretty easy for him to make that decision. Just took him 1 minute. Just took him 1 minute to make that decision. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, knight to a5, and knight to d2. Yeah. So in these types of structures, c4 has become a great square for the knight because white cannot play b3 to expel it. So it makes sense for white to play knight d2 to prevent the occupation of that square. And black has replied with rook c8, making it very clear that he wants to play c5 next, and he wants that rook on the soon to be opened c file. And white has replied with e4. D takes c4, knight takes c4, and queen to d5. And rook f e1. So this type of position, so this is a Baltic defense position, but this reminds me a lot of certain middle games that are very common in the Petrov defense when white starts with e4. So this is what I'm talking about. Take a look at this middle game here. Now take a look at this. e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. That's the Petrov defense. Knight takes e5, d6, knight f3, knight takes d4, d4, d5, bishop to d3, knight c6. Here, c4. So this is a very well-known line of the Petrov defense. a3, knight takes c3, b takes c3, knight c6. C takes d5, queen takes d5, bishop f4, rook here, and then h3, knight to a5. So this is well-known book in the Petrov defense. Now compare that with what happened right here in the Baltic. It's the similarity is remarkable. Let's take a look at board number 5, where international master Liam Putnam is. Has his title become official yet? Let me look this up. I'm not going to call Liam Putnam a FIDE master if his IM title has been made official. Yes, international master Liam Putnam. King Cowgirl was talking about Miles Hinson like since like an hour ago. Let's see what's up with Miles. So Miles Hinson in for, of course, a pretty tough battle. His opponent is rated 2403. E4, C5. King Cowgirl, can you let us know what's why you're rooting for Miles here? Is this a buddy of yours? D4, C takes D4, knight takes D4, knight C6. We have a Sicilian. We have an open Sicilian. Let's see which type of variation. Looks like we're going to have a Taimanov. Knight to C3. Friend of Bushwick chess. Queen to C7. He's come through and beat some strong club players. Nice. Forgive my ignorance. What is Bushwick chess? Is that a chess club? What is that? Queen to C7, bishop to E3, and pawn to A6. And white is going to go here for one of the most aggressive possible ways to face the Taimanov. This queen F3 line is extremely aggressive. He's going to castle queenside next. And he has. One of the ideas here is that if If black wants to play bishop e7, white plays g4, allows knight e5 to be played. It's kind of weird that white should allow this because it looks like white is simply going to drop a pawn. But it's not actually quite that simple. When white plays the queen to g3, black's queen on c7 is hanging, and that makes the capture of the g4 pawn impossible with the e5 knight. Black should capture this pawn with the f6 knight attacking the bishop, and then white plays the bishop to d2, and black's position is now worse and awkward and dangerous because these knights are weirdly positioned and the pawn on g7 is very weak. f4 is threatening to win a knight. This diagram right here is one of the reasons why black should be so careful about the queen f3 line. So we've had knight f6, queenside castling, knight to e5, and queen to g3. So we're a chess club located at Nuke Cafe. Play every Tuesday and host some national masters and new Argentinian FIDE master Juan Pereira. Nice. Nice. So we've had knight e5 and queen to g3. So the pawn on g7 is under attack. That makes it hard for black to develop the dark squared bishop for the moment being. White also wants to push f4, attacking this knight, followed by e5, attacking the other one. This variation is hard, guys. It's hard to play it as black. Black needs to know quite a bit of theory. b5 is the move here, allowing f4 to be played, and then the bishop is attacked with knight g4. And then after the bishop comes back to g1 and white wants to play h3, then black should play h5. Black should play h5. Normal in super. Why are there 7 rounds, not 5 and not 9? Yeah, usually when we do these broadcasts, we're talking about 9-round events. This one is going to be for 7 rounds, so it's slightly shorter than the ones we're used to. And then after, but just to finish the argument about the opening here, it is well known in Sicilian Taimanov theory that after h3 for white and b4 for black, this is a chaotic yet pretty balanced position. I am not very much updated with the theory here, but I believe that this is chaotic but equal. And to my knowledge, d6 is a clear mistake, and Miles should be in trouble already. And it only took him a minute and a half to make this decision. The problem with this move is that after f4, knight g4, white is not going to allow this exchange. The bishop goes back to g1. Yes, it's completely shutting out the rook on h1, and that's the idea, because h3 is coming, and it's hard for black to find good homes for both knights. It's almost like black would like to have just one knight on the board, and that knight stays on f6. h5, h3, h4. Yeah, the queen goes back to e1, and the knight needs to go to h6, but that blocks the rook, and then queen takes h4. Miles Hinson is almost lost. I am sorry about this, King Cowgirl. He got caught. He got caught in the opening. He played a very normal-looking move that puts black in dire straits. Very bad position out of the opening. After queen takes h4, So we've had bishop e7. The queen goes back to g3, attacking that pawn. And then b5, trying to go for some counterplay. Wow. And white did not take that pawn on g7. So we're going to have to figure this out ourselves. Why not queen takes g7? This was not played. So if queen takes g7, so the rook is under attack. It cannot go to g8 because of queen takes h6. So the rook goes to h7, protected by the f6 knight. There are no back rank checks for white. The queen goes back to g3, and then b4 attacks this knight, which is protecting this pawn, which means that black will be able to play knight takes e4 on the next move, attacking the queen on g3, and this is why this is playable for black, and this is why instead of queen takes g7, white has played a3. Bishop to b7 and bishop to d3. And rook to c8. Really? Like, he's never protecting g7 here. He's really playing with fire. Miles, protect that pawn. Listen, nobody likes the castle kingside with a wide open h file like that, right? Well, but this rook is not going to attack black's king. There's a pawn on h3. White would love to get rid of this pawn so that the queen and the rook can put on a battery here, but that's not realistic. That's not possible. And kingside castling would protect the g7 pawn. It would connect the rooks. And then black should start thinking about some way to break the center, either with d5 or e5, and try to get some play there, but still unlikely. But it looks like it's almost like Miles believed that Liam would never take the pawn because he decided not to take it the first time and the second time. But he has played with fire for far too long, and now it's completely correct to take it. Black has played rook h7, the queen goes back to g3, and black is completely lost. Black simply lost 2 pawns, and these knights, they are not going anywhere because white's pawns are very well placed to dominate them. Black's king in the middle of the board, awkwardly coordinated pieces, down 2 pawns, and barring anything crazy that could happen, and crazy things can happen, but out of all the games we've seen so far, this is the one with already a very likely decisive result looming on the horizon. And e5 has been played. Exactly, King Cowgirl. Liam, Miles Hinson has a very restricted position there. E5 has been played. That's an attempt to get counterplay, and I don't think. Well, white should be very careful about playing f takes e5 in general in these situations, just because we don't want to activate the opponent's dark squared bishop. So Liam is only going to play f takes e5 and allow this bishop to become more active only if he calculates very concretely that f takes e5 is going to work tactically. because f takes e5 is wrong strategically. This knight should move. Yes, he has just played. I was just going to mention that. This looks like a great move. Great move. He protects f4 with the knight. And he overprotects the other knight on c3. And he never opens this diagonal for the bishop. And this is completely winning for Liam Putnam. Let's go take a look at board number 6. I would like to have confirmation. Can you confirm to me, please, if International Master Aaron Jacobson is a brother of Grandmaster Brendan Jacobson? And I'm going to look up his FIDE profile as well. Aaron Jacobson. $23.81 is his FIDE rating and standard right now. 25 years old. Yes, he is. He is the older brother of 21-year-old Grandmaster Brendan Jacobson. He's playing black against Max Rosenthal. Max Rosenthal rated 1997. Let's take a look at that game. E4, E5. Thank you, Sarathi. Thank you, Kevin. Knight C6, Knight C3, Knight F6, D4, E takes D4, and Knight D5. So we have a 4 knights opening. Wow, it had been years the last time I saw this Knight D5 move here. I'm going to take a look at the opening book. I just got curious if this is still offbeat as I recall it, or yes, it is offbeat. Okay. It's interesting. Anytime we see a move that looks kind of different being played nowadays, like, hey, was that an offbeat move, or am I just outdated, or am I an offbeat player myself? No. Knight takes d4 is by far and wide the main line, but Knight d5 is a playable secondary alternative. I have not analyzed this move in years. But I do recall that Knight takes c4 is not a mistake. And that there are different ways for black to play this. Aaron after this. Oh, Jacobson played Knight b4 very, very quickly. And this is black's option number 2 in the opening book behind Bishop e7. And Knight takes, yes, and Knight takes e4 is completely playable. So Knight b4, Bishop to c4, Knight takes d5, E takes d5. And Bishop b4 check. Interesting. So White doesn't want to play the bishop to d2. White wants to play the king to f1, and he did so very, very quickly in the game. Why is it again? Why is king f1 stronger than bishop d2? I guess I see why. Is Sergey Kudrin playing in this tournament? No, he's not playing in this one. Like Gorish replied. Go Irish replied. So after bishop, yeah. So this makes sense. Bishop d2 runs into queen e7 check, queen to e2, and then bishop takes d2 check, and we don't have an ideal way to capture. If we take with the king, we don't castle. If we take with the knight, we no longer attack d4. Then queen takes e2 check. If bishop takes, the pawn on d5 hangs. And if king takes, king side castling and rook e8 check. And this does not look very good for white. This does not look very good. Because white is down a pawn at the moment. And white is just trying to get the pawn back. This cannot be good. So king f1 makes sense, and certainly this is book for Max Rosenthal because he played it instantly. King side castling, queen takes d4, and bishop to e7. Okay. So Aaron Jacobson doesn't want his bishop to possibly become a target. I'm just wondering, yeah, because if d6 is played, he was probably annoyed at bishop g5. Actually, he was certainly annoyed by bishop g5 and the fact that his pawns are going to get doubled up on the king side. So when he plays the bishop to e7, he overprotects his knight in advance. That takes the sting out of bishop g5, and then he can play d6, develop the light squared bishop somewhere, and he will have a passive dark squared bishop at least for a short while, but his position is going to be completely solid. Bishop d3, d6, bishop g5, h6, and h4. Oh. Okay. Well, h takes g5 is certainly losing. H takes g5, h takes g5, queen h4, and there will be a checkmate on the h file, and this has to be over. Instead, black plays the rook to e8, rook to e1, bishop to d7. Yeah, this looks like good strategy by Aaron Jacobson. What he's basically asking Max here is, hey Max, if I don't take the bishop on g5, what can you do to prove to me that advancing your h pawn to h4 truly improved your position? And then, of course, the rooks are not connected. The king is not castled. White has an advantage in space based on the pawn on d5 there. And we've had queen to f4. That sacrifices the d5 pawn. But yes, of course, the pawn on knight takes d5 would be a blunder, because queen e4 wins instantly, threatens a checkmate in 2 while attacking the knight. And once the knight goes to f6, we play bishop takes f6, queen h7 check, and queen h8 checkmate. But instead of picking up the pawn on d5, Aaron Jacobson plays the knight to h5. And white plays the queen back to d4. Max Rosenthal is sending the message loud and clear to Aaron Jacobson that if Jacobson wants a draw, he'll take it. So if Jacobson plays the knight back to f6, Max plays the queens back to f4, and we could have a draw. That is, however, unlikely to happen because black's position is very pleasant. Black can, for example, now just go ahead and play bishop f6. We're going to take a look at 2 more games here on boards number 7 and 8. Joshua Colas is playing Anthony Levin on board number 7, and we have very much a Ding Liren versus a Domarajo Gukash World Championship type of opening. Knight f3, d5, c4, e6, g3, knight f6. We have a ready system / English opening, And white goes for the double fianchetto. B6, bishop to B2, and bishop to B7. Dingley Ren must be hurting so much right now. After his win on game number 12, it really felt like he was locked in, and you know, we were going to possibly have a tie breaks, but whatever happened, he was mentally tough. What happened to Dingley Ren? You can't blunder multiple times in World Championship matches, but it really felt at the end that it was about his emotions and it was about the mental game, not lack of chess skill. So bishop b7, e3. Yeah, King Cowgirl mentioning there's no games tomorrow. Broke my heart. I did not follow anything. Like I saw the game. I studied the game. I did not follow any of the interviews. That quote, "There's no games tomorrow," is by whom, King Cowgirl? Can you share that with us? So d takes c4, b takes c4, and pawn to c5. So black gives up some center by playing d takes c4, but this is not really a bad idea. Black wants to play c5, and black is inviting white to play this type of pawn structure, which is known as the hanging pawns. Two central pawns, well advanced, potentially weak. They can be very strong. They gain space, but they can also become targets. This is the type of middle game that Anthony Levin is inviting Joshua Colas to play. But white is playing differently, not committing the pawns in the center way too much, playing the queen to e2, pawn to d3. It's a very modern way to play. Knight to c3, queen to c7. The knight on c3 does not allow black to play b5. And now this knight goes to h4. The intention behind this move, and it's a very common thing in this line, guys, is white plays the knight to h4 and then plays this pawn to f4, this pawn to g4, this pawn to g5. And the positioning of the pawns on e3, f4, and g5 really agrees with the dark squared bishop along this diagonal right here. Everyone expecting game 14 to be a draw, then a blunder right at the end. Yeah. Oh, I see, King Cowgirl. Yeah. I mean, I looked at the game when it was drawn, and it felt like such a standard basic draw at that level that it never occurred to me that either of the two players would make enough of a mistake there for the game to actually end in any other result than a draw. Knight h4, rook fd8, and white has indeed played the pawn to f4. So it looks like Joshua Colas understands these positions well, and he's very well acquainted with how the middle games are supposed to be played. This is kind of unusual to all of us who are used to the regular king's pawn and queen's pawn openings, playing either e4 or d4 earlier on. This is what we call hyper-modern strategy, where the central pawns, they don't advance too much. The flanks get advanced. And the central pawns, it's not like they won't advance for sure. They can advance later, but everything is kept flexible as far as the center of the board is concerned. Knight to b4, rook a d1. The pawn on d3, of course, is under attack, and white recaptures with the knight on g2. White wants the knight to be absent from this diagonal, so it's not on this bishop's diagonal here. And then And then b5 has been played. Oh, really? So that can be played, even though white can take it twice. Boom, boom, boom. We'll go to the analysis board sometimes. Let's go to the analysis board again here. So this is what I'm... So this is what I'm looking at. Let's take a look at this. So after b5, c takes b5, a takes b5, knight takes b5, attacks the queen, but the queen goes to b7, attacks the knight. After it goes to c3, the queen is attacking the bishop on b2, so knight takes d3 becomes a possibility. Knight takes d3, rook takes d3, rook takes d3, queen takes d3, queen takes b2, and black is doing just fine. And this looks good. Looks good. Looks like Anthony Levin is playing quite the game up until this point. We've had c takes, oh, and a3. Okay. Oh. Okay. So Colas wants to take on b5. He just wants to eject the knight from b4 first. So we've had knight d5 and knight takes b5. And queen to a5 looks awesome because it attacks the knight but also attacks the c3 square. So this move is not possible. Wow. The FIDE master, Joshua Colas, is in... he might be under a bit of pressure here, at least a little bit. Black is certainly fine. White should be the one thinking about how to equalize, and he seems to have found a way. He plays the pawn to a4, and then instead of trading the knight here, he wants the outpost for the knight on c4. And black is really going for it here. 3 attackers against the d3 pawn. Anthony Levin, this is good. And he's forcing the FIDE master to defend himself. Colas might be in trouble, because rook a2 should be next. Looks like a lot of pressure on the 7th rank and on the d file against the pawn on d3 with more aggressive and better coordinated pieces. Okay, so far this is the most, when it comes to the underdogs outshining the favorites, this is the game of the round so far. Anthony Levin is outplaying Joshua Colas here. And Brian and Ming Lin, now already a FIDE master, and approaching IM status very quickly. I wanna take a quick look at his FIDE profile as well. He's so young. He's 13 years old. E4, C5, knight to E2, and pawn to E6. So Brian is playing black against Ethan Kozawa. E4, c5, knight to e2 and e6, knight bc3 and knight c6, and pawn to d4. C takes d4, knight takes d4, and knight f6. And this is the four knights variation of the Sicilian defense. The two main moves for white are knight takes c6, the most aggressive choice, and knight d4 going to b5. That's more positional. With knight takes c6, we allow black to improve his central pawn structure, but we get to play e5 as a response. And after black plays the knight to the center of the board, then we can go ahead and play the knight to e4 right after. The knight goes to e4 there. We have let's go back to the hall here. Okay, so with knight b5, bishop to c5, knight d6 check. The king goes to e7, and the bishop goes to f4. This is all book. This is all normal. Looks weird for black to position the king. On e7 right now, but the knight is under attack twice, and black would be delighted to see white play knight takes c8 check there. So we had king to e7, bishop to f4, and here the pawn goes to e5, knight f5 check, and king to f8. Okay. I'm going to talk more about this position here in a moment, guys. We're going to take a pretty short break here. We're going to be right back in a couple of minutes. So I'm taking a look at the Miguel. I am looking at. We're not having Sahana's video here for some reason. Um,
Calvin might be able to help you with that.
yes. To everyone watching the stream, like one of the games ended in round number in board number 12, and a grandmaster Michael Rode was the game ended in a draw against Sahana, and Sahana is here with us to speak with us. The final position is super interesting, especially Sahana, because did you feel that Black that might have been suffering a little bit in the final position? I'm looking at it right now, and it looks like that pass pawn on b5 was very strong there.
Yeah, so I thought maybe I was a bit better, but I was gonna play King H1 in this position. Um, but I wasn't sure. Well, to start with, I was down on the clock, so that was a major part. And I also wasn't sure that my position would be like amazing because
Yeah. And who offered the draw at that point? Oh, he offered the draw there. Okay. Um, yeah, that sounds like kind of like a strategic draw offer, because usually grandmasters, when they feel that they are starting to get in trouble, they know very well that once they have a lost position, they're not going to get their draw offer accepted. And sometimes there's like a strategic thing like, hey, I'm a grandmaster. My position is not very good right now. Maybe we could call this a day right now and have a draw while my position is still tolerable. I agree with you that if Black has the time there in that final position to play knight f6, rook f c8, activate the pieces, and you can't make anything happen with the passed b pawn, then Black might just be completely okay there. But at the same time, um, looking at White's position, it does look like you are dominating the game there, and that must feel pretty good. Okay. 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 So at this point right here. So oh, I see. Yes, 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 yes. Uh, once that knight goes on d4, it attacks the queen, forks the queen and the bishop on e2. At the same time, given the fact that the knight on d4 is going to be very strong on his own, but it's not going to have lots of pieces to cooperate with it, right? That's usually the problems for Black in those positions where it's an amazing knight on d4, but it's like the other pieces are just not cooperating with the knight properly there. And given the fact that you have an amazing diagonal and light square domination, it's almost like pick your poison kind of thing, where if Black plays the bishop to e6 or the knight to e6, he's going to be at least a bit worse, uh, but maybe in different ways, right? That is true. And I gotta. This is awesome. So I'm looking at looking at how the entire game developed up until move number 23, it does look like you are playing this game supremely well. When Black agrees to having these types of positional holds on d5, it's always some sort of a positional a gamble. It's risky because Black depends on having the pieces protecting the d5 square well, and once that doesn't happen and White gets to dominate the d5 square like that, it's always difficult for Black to ensure that he's going to be able to kind of like compensate the weakness with activity of the pieces, right? But the way you played the opening here and the early stages of the middle game, this seemed to be like almost like a model way to play against these King's Indian plans. Can you tell us like up until which point this was booked for you and when you started improvising? Okay, so we're going to Miguel later fix these moments when we have the interviews with the players, because the audience is letting us know that they actually cannot hear Sahana, but Sahana is sharing with us guys that when the way that the opening here was played is not how she the types of openings that she has a lot of experience with, but I'm gonna say that this game reminds me a lot of how Reshevsky. I don't know if you've studied Semi Reshevsky's game, Sahana, when he plays White in the King's Inn, and this feels like Semi Reshevsky was playing the white pieces, like the way he expands the queen side, and it's almost like Semi Reshevsky had a knack for making King's Indian guys regret playing the King's Indian, just because of like how quickly he was able to expand the queen side and get an initiative going there. It was it really felt like Samuel Reshevsky was playing the white pieces here. This was pretty pretty awesome. Mhm. On the queen side, yeah. So Sahana is sharing with us, guys, that she expected Grandmaster Michael Rode to play on the king side a little bit more, because that's usually what you do in the King's Indian, and Black can play f takes e4 to open up the f file and maybe vacate the f5 square for the bishop. And she just felt during the game that since Black was spending a few tempi on the area of the board where White has the advantage, that made her feel pretty comfortable. This is awesome, Sahana. I will be definitely watching your games very closely here from the rest of the tournament, because you're clearly a very, very talented player. You were outplaying a grandmaster there, and congratulations on the result, and with the rest of the tournament for you. Nice. This was cool. So we've done lots of these streams before, right? And me personally, I'm not a tech expert, but we're trying this for the first time. Certainly, we're going to have a sit down with the tech team and these interviews, because what we're going to do is, like, we're going to have the video of the player with the audio, and this is going to be these interviews are actually going to be pretty awesome, but they're probably going to get ideal from the second round onwards. We're gonna take a short 10-minute break here, but I just would like to revisit the top two boards, where we have our biggest stars, Brandon Jacobson and Andrew Tang, playing. We had left the Jacobson game after knight takes c5, and we had a little bit of engine analysis in this position where a3 followed by b4 was better. Knight takes c5, knight f3, bishop to f5. Knight f3. I'm having the tech team is helping me out with something here, guys. I'll have a moment. Okay, so we've had bishop to c4 and pawn to g6, kingside castling, and bishop to g7. d6 and queen to d8. Whoa. There's no way this pawn can be captured here, I don't think. E takes d6, rook e1 check. The pawn structure looks like it. Looks like a Karapenov, but it actually started with a completely offbeat opening here with c4, c5. E4, knight takes e4. So we spent quite a little bit of time in the opening here talking about this position after queen a5 check, because bishop d2 is the main move here according to theory. After knight d2, knight takes c5, knight f3, bishop f5, bishop c4. So this type of pawn structure can really definitely arise from the Panov variation of the Caro-Kann. I did not expect d6 to be played, and I'm still trying to fully understand this. But it looks like a fantastic move. I just did not expect this could work out so well for white so quickly. E takes d6 cannot really be played. After a rook e1 check followed by knight g5, there's no way this is playable for black. There's just no way. Like here and here, attacking f7 with everybody, there's just no way. Queen to d8 was played. Look, William Hoffman, I mentioned early in the opening that this was a little bit of a gamble of his against a player of this level, and he was probably going to get in trouble because of it. And it looks like he's getting in trouble way quicker than I thought. D6 is a tremendous move. I must confess I did not fully understand it at first. It's just a fantastic move. It's just a fantastic move. And after queen takes d8, queen d8 is looking suspicious, I agree, but what else is there for black? Because I'm thinking about e6, right? E6 is going to close the e file, and it also protects this diagonal right here. But then I'm thinking about knight b3, knight takes b3, and queen takes b3, attacking the b7 pawn. Maybe queen to... And then if queen here, then I'll play bishop b5 check, followed by bishop b3. This. And I don't know if I should even play d7 check first to begin with. And then bishop b3. So queen d8 was played, d takes e7, queen takes e7, and rook to e1. So the only thing look, William Hoffman is counting on right now is he needs the e6 square to be well defended enough by the bishop and the knight and the pawn that nothing much will happen on the e file. But after this, he will certainly be able to castle kingside at least, but there's just no way he's going to be able to get out of the open here without paying the price. After bishop e6, we've had knight b3. It's too much pressure against c5 and against d6 at the same time. If black had two tempi to play knight bd7 and kingside castling, he would be okay, but black has lagged behind in development way too much here, and there's no way he's going to get he's going to be able to get a good position out of the opening, or probably not even a playable one. So what we've had was knight bd7 and then bishop to f4. Kingside castling and bishop d6. Okay, so the only way he found to finish the development with a safe king was to give up material, and this is probably something that was going to happen one way or the other. So bishop d6, queen to f6, bishop takes f8, and knight takes f8, and bishop takes e6. The pawn on b7 was under attack, and now it's protected by the queen. I'm trying to see if black might have any compensation for the exchange here, but not really. Rook d8 might be played next, but this queen comes back to probably e4, keeping the pin going on the e file, like rook d8, queen to e4. And knight takes d4 is never a possibility due to queen takes e7, and so this is just lost. So this is just completely lost for Luke William Hoffman. He will need a bit of a miracle to save this game here, because he's down in exchange and he's also under pressure positionally. He has a worse position as well. Okay, yeah, these moves have been played. Rook to d8 and queen to e4. This is way too much pressure. Let's take a look at board number 2 again, with Andrew Tang playing the white pieces. We had stopped on move 9 when James Marsh had played knight d2 here, and Andrew Tang thought for a long while to make his decision. I was at this moment talking about the differences between knight takes g3 and knight takes c3, and taking the bishop on g3 is definitely the safer choice, and I issued the opinion that this is probably what Andrew Tang was going to go for, just because the lines after knight takes c3 get incredibly complex and engine based as well, and taking on g3 makes a lot more sense for someone who wants to just get out of the opening with a good position and maybe be able to demonstrate in the middle game that he's the stronger player. We've had knight takes g3, h takes g3, and pawn to c6. This move is important. It has to be played one way or the other, and it's better to play it sooner rather than later. It overprotects the d5 pawn, which is important. It takes away any queen a4 check ideas, any queen b3 ideas that can attack the bishop on b4, the pawn on b7, and the pawn on d5 as well. So this is the type of move that solidifies the pawn structure here, and this is fine here for black. We have queen to c2 and queen to f6 attacking the d4 pawn. Huh. So here's a question. Can anybody answer this question right here? This bishop on c8 is hanging. It was protected by the queen right here. And black has played the queen to f6, attacking the pawn on d4. Why doesn't white play knight takes d5? This move was not played by James Marsh. Certainly a trap laid by Andrew Tang. He might have been hoping that his opponent would fall for it. Knight takes d5 is a really bad move, but why? Knight takes d5, bishop takes d2. And this should be lost for white, right? This should be lost for white. Because if queen takes, then c takes d5, and the bishop is not hanging. And if king takes d2, queen takes d4 check, and the knight is hanging there as well. So we should be playing e3 was played instead. So now knight takes d5 is way more of a possibility, and bishop e6 defends against that. Okay. Bishop e6 is just going to defend against that. We've had bishop to d3, bishop to d6. So black has the bishop pair here, but that does not mean an advantage for black in any way. White typically has good play with the knights here. For example, the c5 square being available for either of these knights. There are certain instances where white can favorably break in the center with e4 as well. Black's light squared bishop is not great. So yeah, the pair of bishops certainly does not mean an advantage here at all. I'm going to do something with my chess-based program here for a moment, as I am running separate analysis boards over here. So let's take a look. After knight f3, knight to d7, then James Marsh has decided to castle queenside. This is something I did not think was going to happen in this game. I did not expect white to make this decision. Since he has captured on g3 with the h-pawn and opened the h-file, then he's feeling uncomfortable with kingside castling. And I certainly understand that. It's just that kingside castling is not a mistake here. It's not the end of the world for white to make this decision. It's kind of risky, I know. It looks kind of risky, but the point is that if I castle kingside, then I can play e4 very, very quickly, threaten the fork on e5 against the queen and the dark squared bishop. And if black plays d takes e4, I can always take with the knight here as well. So the e-file is going to be open, and white can very realistically pay the price of risking his king being a bit exposed on the king side for the counterplay of reacting quickly in the center and opening up the position favorably. So it's extremely complex, requires very exact calculation, but it can be a very fair trade-off. I like to play these positions as white, and I don't like to castle queenside here a whole lot. And the reason is that I love to play e4 here, and I won't anymore once I castle queenside, because these bishops are just going to become amazing on these diagonals once e4 is played. And so I don't like to play these positions with kind of like the commitment of not playing e4. So queenside castling happened, and then we've had bishop to b4 and rook to f1. Yeah, this move might look pretty odd, but it's actually quite standard. White is protecting the pawn on d2 because he wants to play the knight to d2 later on, and the queen will not capture the pawn. In other words, if g4 is played, for example, previously white would have had to play the knight to the h-file on h4 or h2 with the rook protecting f2. But these are not very promising squares for the knight. This knight is better placed on the queen side, typically. So with queenside castling, bishop to b4, rook df1. Then Andrew Tang has castled queenside. So it's very standard that both players will castle kingside in these positions. Black's king is certainly not safe on the king side with the h-file being open, with the h6 pawn being weak. The only thing that black needs to be mindful of is that we might have knight takes d5 or knight b5 shots, but d5 is protected by the bishop, and knight b5 does nothing. It just attacks a7 once, but the king goes here, and the pawn is protected anyway. So what usually happens is that we have a pretty well-behaved type of middle game where both sides castled on the same wing, and the nature of the position is so close that usually it's hard to really press for an advantage for each side, and it's really about slow maneuvering and improving the position slowly. And this is not the most exciting type of game, actually. It's very strategic, it's very slow, games can last very, very long, but I think this is something that Andrew Tang wants to do in a game like this, because he wants to be able to slowly outgrind his opponent from a balanced position, right? That's basically the Magnus Carlsen formula. Bishop to c8. Let's take a look at these final few moves here to take a look at the other boards, because we have plenty of exciting games going on here. White played the knight back to b3 there at the end. So white certainly does not have an advantage. Before we move on to the next game, I would just like to see if I see an advantage for black here. The only problem potentially for black is the h5 pawn, but all white can possibly do is double up rooks and have two attackers, but it's already defended once, and with the queen here we can have two defenders. It doesn't look like the h5 pawn is any trouble at all, and if white has given up utilizing the c5 square for the knight, then basically there's no initiative on the queen side there. Yeah, so Andrew Tang's position is very, very pleasant. They don't have a whole lot of time on the clock, of like about 20 minutes for each of the players. So this is going to be interesting, and probably time trouble will decide the outcome of this game, and that is an area where Andrew Tang is extremely strong. So his position is good. He's doing well on the clock as well. He should be the favorite here, but we'll see what's going to happen. Let's take a look at Kamrakulov's game. We had stopped at move 18 when his opponent had played h6, rook he1 and g6, rook to d2, and king to e8. Quickly going back to the Andrew Tang game, just to answer the gefilte fish talking about this one. Will black play c5 down the line? That is the dream for black to play c5 down the line here, and because if black can play c5 and exchange these pawns without losing any material, that makes it so this diagonal here becomes wide open for the pieces, and it's going to make the dark squared bishop especially a better minor piece, and the open of the c file can help as well. It's just very difficult to make that advance happen. It's very difficult to make it happen. Ideally, he would like to make it happen, but it's very, very hard. So going back to the Kormakulov game, he had a slight edge against Chen Chuan Ling, the candidate master. We've had rook he1, king to d2, king to e8, pawn to h3, rook to c6. a4 and bishop to g7. And then the knight goes to a2. Okay. So if the knight goes to b4 and attacks the rook, the pawn on d6 will hang here. And that has induced Ling to play the bishop back to f8, and that doesn't look very good. But at the same time, knight f6 can be played. Knight f6 is possible, attacking the e4 pawn. Now, this looks like an interesting move. Because if knight b4, there's knight takes e4 now. Knight here attacks the rook. Knight takes e4. Knight takes the rook on c6. Knight takes the rook on d2. Black wins a pawn in this line. Wow, knight f6 looks very strong because Kamrakulov really, he would like to have this rook on d3 in these types of positions, because whenever this pawn gets under attack, he can play knight d2 to defend it. And since the rook on d2 is in the way, the counterplay against this pawn is very strong. Maybe white can play bishop a7, so this rook protects this pawn, but this looks wildly artificial. Black would have been better here with knight f6. What we had was bishop to f8 and pawn to c4. Then bishop to e7 and knight to c3. So yeah, this was Kamrakulov's idea all along when he played the knight to a2. He wanted this pawn to be on c4. He wanted a firm grip on b5 and d5. And then the pawn goes on. The pawn goes to h5, and then we've had. I don't fully understand this move. Does not produce a whole lot for black on the king side and weakens the g5 square. Granted, the g5 square is not the most important square on the board here, but it's not an irrelevant one either. And white exploits it immediately with the knight to g5. Let me take another look at this. Was black not ready to play f5 instead? f5 even gives the king the f7 square, after which he can double the rooks on the c file. Puts pressure in the center, creates the possibility of even trapping the bishop with f4 in certain cases. f5 makes so much more sense for black compared to h5. h5 just weakened the g5 square there. f6. Oh, okay, that was his idea. So he wanted to give up the dark squared bishop to place his pawns on dark squares and then place the king on e7 and trust that the king there with the rook on c6 will be able to efficiently defend d6 for the rest of the game. So that's his strategy. And he might be right. Rook d1, pawn to h4. Okay, now knight b4 has become a huge threat. It would attack the rook and win that pawn. And black has played a5 to take the b4 square away. But that gives up control of the b5 square right after. So knight c3, b6, and knight to b5. Knight to c5 attacks this pawn, but wow, Kamrakulov really had his way with Chen Chuanlin here. Black's position was good, and then it became just tolerable, but now it's really bad. Oh, and rook takes d6. Far too many weaknesses for black now, especially the b6 pawn. And if black loses d6 and then b6, then a5 loses as well, and he's going to be completely lost. Unless there's something for black here that I'm not seeing, he's completely lost now. He has gotten a completely lost position. Wow, it looks like I didn't like h5 when I saw it, but at a first glance it looked like unnecessary and mildly weakening, but it was probably a major weakness. And there's this quote in chess that says that bad bishops are great defenders of important pawns. We should not strive to have bad bishops, but sometimes we have to keep the bad bishop. We have to keep it, because that's the bishop that will protect the weakest pawns on the board. And without his worst minor piece, black's position actually deteriorated. And that's pretty incredible. It looks like he's now completely lost. The reason he's completely lost is that after rook takes d6 attacking this pawn, even if this pawn is defended like this, we can play rook takes b6, rook takes b6, and bishop takes c5 check. And this is winning for white. Kamrakulov did not decide to take with the rook. He's still taking his time here. He's got a lot of time on the clock, 32 minutes versus 6. It's going to be very hard for Chen Chuanling to survive this game here. Let's go take a look at Mikola Bortnik's game on board number 4. We had stopped on move 17 with a position that looked very balanced. Black has a very good positional blockade of the light squares in the center here. After knight c4, queen to g3, queen to c6, and knight to d2. Wow. Knight takes a3 looks pretty risky. Oh, so there's no rook takes e7, because rook takes e7, rook takes a3, rook e1 check, knight f1, and queen c4. Looks like this is it. This is so interesting. What a risky move by Bortnik. Bortnik really likes to win, huh? Bortnik really likes to win chess games. What an effort to play for a win, to play knight takes a3 here. Wow. But his calculation seems to be accurate. If rook takes e7, rook takes e7, rook takes check, knight f1, and queen to c4, this is completely over. Black wins. So rook e5 is played here. And white wants to double the rooks instead, put pressure against e7 and e8 at the same time. This becomes super difficult to evaluate after. We've had bishop f8, rook a e1. It's almost like Bortnik. So Gefilte Fish mentioning that he would not be thrilled as black, but I really admire what Bortnik is doing here. Like Bortnik, the things that he will do to play for a win. I don't think there's any other player in this tournament that's willing to run the risks that Bortnik is. And he dives into very calculation-specific variations where if he misses, his calculation is off by one tempo, he has to pay a huge price, and he goes for it. He says, okay, that's okay, let's do it. I don't see where the compensation is for white. And this is, I am so puzzled by this because knight takes a3 looks so ugly. Looks like, of course, he would like to fork the rooks. He would like to fork the rooks here. But what about queen d3? What about queen d3? Because queen d3 takes away c2 from the knight and takes away c4 from the knight as well. So what if this knight is just not allowed to leave for the moment being? It can leave to b5 and it protects a7, but then I'll push c4. I attack the knight. d4 is protected by the queen. Rook takes a7 is next, and white will get the pawn back, and probably with a slight positional advantage maybe, but yeah, but not a lot. The rook on a7 looks awesome, but it's not really doing all that much. This is not very special. But I mean, when white plays the queen to d3, if this is what we get, at least black is trying to prove equality, not white. And white's position is certainly safe. Since the pawn on c4 is well defended, white is certainly safe. Bortnik does not mind playing an ugly move. If it works, it works. And he really trusts his ability to calculate variations deeper and more efficiently than his opponents. And he has an advantage on the clock too here, which doesn't hurt. And after he plays the rook here to e8, it looks like he's just up a pawn now. He's just up a pawn, and he might be on his way to win. So the pawn on c7 is up for grabs now. But white did not take it. Why not? Okay, so knight b5 attacks the bishop and this pawn, and then queen e1 check will attack the king and this pawn. Right, so we could have bishop to f4, queen e1 check, knight to f1, and queen takes c3 wins the pawn, creating two pass connected pawns on the queen side. Or maybe even worse, we can take it with the knight. We can take with the knight. Okay, that's completely winning. So bishop takes c7 was bad. Bishop takes c7 was very bad. h4 was played instead. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. c6 and c4. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow. Bortnik is putting on a clinic here on how to take calculated risks to play for a win against lower rated players, because the nature of this position here is so calm that if he doesn't play knight takes a3, it would be very hard for him to be able to truly play this for a win. Yeah. everything worked. Everything worked. It's just this pass pawn is not dangerous at all. White would need some major pieces on the board here for this pass pawn to become dangerous. Just with a couple of minor pieces, this pawn is actually very, very harmless. We had knight e4, knight to b4. d6, knight to c6. Knight to c5 and b6. Knight a6 and king to e6. Yeah, this looks like a very clear win for Mykola Bortnik. It looks like the real critical moment for White was on move 20 when Bortnik captured the pawn on a3. And queen d3 here certainly would have given White a good position, but rook e5 was a mistake because White is not going to have enough time to put the pressure on the e-file that he would like. And after bishop f8, the bishop keeps the knight protected. The e-file is covered in black. Just like that, black was able to stay up a healthy pawn without White being able to prove any compensation. This type of win impresses me. Bortnik was not on his way to win his game, on this game. And when he played knight takes a3, Lev Schengen was probably like, really? Can you do that? Are you sure you can take that pawn? And it took Bortnik only 2.5 minutes to make this decision. This is very impressive. Let's go back to Liam Putnam's win here. Liam Putnam has defeated Miles Hinson. We talked about how the opening was a complete disaster for Miles. This d6 move in the opening here in the Taimanov is a well-known mistake in the Taimanov variation of the Sicilian, and it's not a small one. It's big enough of a mistake that black's position becomes truly, truly horrible. It was completely unnecessary to have given up the second pawn there. This was the chess equivalent of a bluff. So Gefilte Fish is asking, as an international master, would you also take the pawn on a3? Or would you assume a 2000 rated player will make mistakes later, which can be leveraged? So that's the thing that makes knight takes a3 so impressive by Bortnik, okay? It's the fact that if he doesn't make that move, it's how does he win? You know, it certainly the nature of the position is what drove him to make such a drastic decision. There's nothing much happening, and if he doesn't capitalize on the possibility to take this pawn right now, the position is so it's a little bit monotonous, a little bit dull, and it's hard to make something happen. So he just took it upon himself to go for it and to complicate it as much as he could. And I have seen this backfire for Bortnik, but the interesting thing is he doesn't stop doing it. It's like, if it backfires once, next time he goes there and does it again. It's almost like he understands that this is a high risk, high reward type of strategy that will inevitably lead to some disasters from time to time. But, you know, when it works, and the majority of the time it works, you know, he can absolutely win games that he was not supposed to have won. it's more about ambition. Gefilte Fish. It's like he just wants to win, and he wants to find a way to do it. He doesn't like to have dull draws. He doesn't like the game to end without a real fight, without a real struggle. I think it's just in his temperament. I think it's just in Bortnik's temperament that he's like, hey, if you sit down to play chess with me, you're in for a war. You have to experience the war. So we had stopped Putnam's position after 92. He was up 2 points. His position was just winning. Queen to f3, queen to a5. So we see now that Miles Hinson is just trying to find some counterplay on the queen side, maybe a bit desperately. The knight on c3 is not weak because it's protected by another knight. He just wants to play b4, open up the b file, and see if something can happen there. So bishop to f2 connects the rooks, then pawn to b4. A takes b4, queen takes b4, f takes c5, and bishop b3. a5 and g4. That threatens to win a piece with g5. Black strategies now is just to push the a pawn so that white's king can be a bit more exposed, but that is pretty slow. We've had g5 and a3. B takes a3, queen check, and the king goes to d2. Bishop to b4, and queen takes f6. Nice. This king is going to be safe on e2. That's just the thing. Bishop takes c3 check, knight takes c3, queen takes c3 check. The king is safe on e2. I have seen this pattern in the Sicilian defense many times. Takes, check, the king goes to e2. Rook h7. Ran into bishop e5 check, and he resigned. Okay, now we just have checkmating patterns on d8. If bishop c6, bishop takes c6, queen takes c6, rook d8 check, rook takes d8, queen takes c6 check. Yeah. This is completely winning. Yeah. Was there anything that could have been done instead of rook h7? No, not really. I mean, bishop c6 protects the check, but then the rook gets taken there. Quite the win for Liam Putnam. It starts the tournament in the best way possible, because not only was this a win, this was a win that was much easier than he probably had expected before the game. Well, his opening prep was flawless. Slutty Type I saying hi to us. Hi, how you doing, my friend? Nice to have you with us. It's not our fault. It's not our fault when we prepare the openings awesomely and the opponent's opening prep is like ages behind our own. And nowadays we don't expect to be able to get such huge advantages out of the opening, but that doesn't mean it can't happen from time to time. It can happen from time to time. And it happened today. For Liam Putnam, this was a fantastic way to start the tournament. It was an aggressive win. It was one of those types of wins that give you an energy boost, but at the same time, it was not a difficult one, you know. Slutty Type I. I'm just trying to learn, and aren't we all, my friend? Nice to have you here. Let's take a quick look at how the Bortnik game ended, because it has already ended. Bortnik has beaten Lev Shengin with the black pieces. We looked at the position up until move number 34. King to e6, knight c7 check, king to d7. Uh, A6, knight C7, bishop takes D6. Okay. Wow, so white did not even want to keep playing this position. That's extremely surprising. This was... White did not lose on time. White resigned and endgame down 1 pawn. It is completely lost, though. He's down a pawn, but he also has the worst king and the worst knight, and black's passed pawn is one of those annoying outside passed pawns that it's extremely hard for the white king to fight against. So that being said, it's too early. Well, there's also the time. You know, he had 1 minute and 43 seconds against 33 minutes. He figured he really didn't have a shot. But me personally, I continue playing these positions just because, especially since I don't have a lot of time on the clock, well, I don't have to sit there and suffer for too long. It's very clear that knight c7 is a decent move. Controls the b5 square so black doesn't push b5 so quickly. You can make a few more moves before resigning. It's okay. I also do understand whoever makes the decision to just quit, because, yeah, the likelihood of a loss is certainly above 99% at this point. And Kamrakolov has won his game as well. Let's take a look at how things ended with Kamrakolov's game here against candidate master Chen Xuanling. We looked at it up until move number 33, rook takes d6, rook takes d6. And we mentioned that against rook b8, we have rook takes b6 anyway. Rook takes b6 and bishop takes c5. Check with a fork, winning the rook. So knight takes e4 was played instead, and we had rook takes b6. So f5 was played, knight to c7, and bishop to f7. Pawn to f3 and knight to g3. And bishop g5 check. Knight to d5. So this is another game where black resigned down just 1 pawn. Black resigned this position down just 1 pawn, but this is a very legit resignation, actually. This is so hopeless. This is so hopeless. This pawn on a5 cannot be protected, and white's going to have 3 past connected pawns, and black's king is in danger, and this bishop is in danger, and the h4 pawn is in danger, and the e5 pawn is in danger. And it's too much. It's too much. I'm down just 1 pawn, but the compound effect of all the numerous weaknesses in black's position makes this completely intolerable. And it is gefilte fish. Black is busted. Black is completely busted. Okay. Aaron Jacobson has beaten Max Rosenthal. Let's take a look at how that happened. Knight h5, queen to d4. And so this is the moment where we had stopped. After queen d4, it's not impossible for black to play h takes g5 here. Now this really has to be well calculated. H takes g5, white certainly answers with h takes g5, and then black plays g6. But then g4, knight g7, and then queen f4. This is very dangerous for black. Fianchettoed knights are horrible defenders of the king. A bishop on g7 would make black's king so much safer. This knight on g7 makes it horrible. Once queen h2 is played here, yeah, this is going to be, no, this should not be played by black. Instead, we had f5, which looks a lot better. Looks a lot better. And then bishop takes e7, rook takes e7. We have a couple of trades. King here, knight to f6, and pawn to c4. Okay, so if white's attack doesn't succeed, white has a worse position by default. The king and the rook are awkwardly positioned here. Black dominates the only open file, and the knight has a great square on g4. It cannot be expelled by a pawn on h3. This helps black as well. Then we've had g3. White wants to be able to play the king to g2. And then pawn to c5. That's a fantastic move. That's a fantastic move by Aaron Jacobson. Yes. Because if white takes en passant and black plays bishop takes c6 and the knight is under attack, that's... No, this is... doesn't look playable. Because if king goes to g2, the knight goes to e5, feels like this is too much. This feels like too much. So after c5, the queen is ejected from its centralized position. It goes to f4. And now queen f6, like, wow, c5 was so good. Because the queen is well centralized, protecting both f2 and b2, and c5, by ejecting it, now black is the one attacking this diagonal. And if queen takes b2 takes place here, then the pawn on f2 becomes way too weak. Queen to d2 and pawn to f4. Nice. Great play by Jacobson here. If g takes f4, rook to f8, this pawn hangs, and with white's isolated pawns on the king side, black is the only one that can be better. He's finding a way to keep the pressure on. It's very, very impressive. So king to g2, rook to f8, doubles the major pieces attacking f3. F takes g3 has just become a huge threat. Rook to f1 and bishop to f5. So by the looks of it, Jacobson wants to trade the bishops, so he wants access to this diagonal with his queen. Just having fun. Yeah, Aaron Jacobson and Brandon Jacobson are brothers. International master Aaron Jacobson is a few years older than Grandmaster Brandon Jacobson, his brother. Queen takes f5, queen takes f4, queen to g6. Okay. Okay. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. This is why this game ended so quickly. Boom, boom. This is it. This is over. Queen e4, and the knight is attacked by the rook and the queen, and white resigned. There's only one move to protect the knight, which is queen c3, but then there's knight e5. So the piece hangs there for sure. Let's take a look at Andrew Tang's game. Just having fun is talking about that. His game is unnerving right now. The top two boards, with at least one of the players in very, very heavy time trouble in his game. Andrew, so we looked at it. We were looking at the game up until move number 25. We had knight b3, bishop to e7, king to a2, bishop to d8. Boom, boom, bishop to d8. Queen to d2 and queen to g7, attacking the rook on h4. The rook moves, and then bishop to g5. Bishop c2 and queen to f6. So Andrew Tang is making sure that h4 is going to be played. This is his strategy to open up the position a little bit more for his bishops, while getting rid of the only weakness, creating an extra open file on the board. He's just it's not that black is better. Black is probably not better. He's just finding ways to keep the game going. Okay, so h4, g takes h4, rook takes h4, bishop takes. The pawn on f2 is being attacked, and g3 cannot be played because of bishop takes g3, and the rook would be hanging. So white instead plays the queen to e1, which protects both the rook and the f2 pawn, and g3 is now a possibility, and it's indeed what just happened. If white doesn't play g3, then black plays g3, and the e3 pawn becomes a target being attacked by the bishop on g5 and the rook on e8. G3 and rook to h8. Bishop to d3 and rook to h2. Knight c1 and bishop f5. So James Marsh has a very, very solid position, okay? Very, very solid. So just having fun. You want one of the IMs to get a norm? I don't know if FIDE rules have changed, and I honestly have not checked, but it was not possible to score any norm if you played less than 9 rounds. So since this is a 7-round tournament, okay, nice. Oh, that's cool. Oh, so we can have norms. Given the right performance rating, we can have norms for the players. This is actually extremely exciting. This being the case, this is extremely exciting. Nice. And James Marsh's, we're not talking maybe enough today here about how impressive his play is. Not because he's outplaying Andrew Tang, because he's not. But just due to the solidity of his play, right? We usually, whenever we praise a chess player, is because of his prowess in his superior strategy that dominated the opponent. But how about a much, much, much lower rated opponent just hanging in there and keeping it solid against the clear favorite? Andrew Tang wants to win this game so badly. He's playing the rook on h3, saying, take my rook so I can have a passed pawn. He's trying everything that he can. And white should not do this, right? Why would white give the opponent a passed pawn on the 6th rank? Another quick look at the Brandon Jacobson game. In this one, he was completely winning. We had stopped on move 20 when he played queen to e4. We've had queen to b4 being played by black. Knight takes e6, queen takes e4, queen takes e4, knight takes e6. So all that black could really muster here is not losing more than the exchange. Other than that, his very speculative opening play allowed a player that's far too strong in Brandon Jacobson to get an advantage in the tempo department. And yeah, Brandon Jacobson's calculation was spot on here too. Knight takes e6 game, and that certainly helped. So a5, rook to b1, b5, and b3. Rook to c8 and rook to e2. Rook to d5. This is, one of the players has a material advantage with a positional advantage to go with it as well. Black has weak pawns on both wings, and this is unbearable. Interesting. He plays the knight to e5, not to h2. h2 looks very natural to me. He plays it to e5 and then pawn to f5. This is a small trap by William Hoffman here, because if knight takes g4, thinking that this knight is hanging, then knight d4 attacks this rook, protected by this bishop, keeping this knight under attack. So knight takes g4, probably not a very good move here. Rook to e1, knight g5. Threatening bishop takes e5, followed by a fork. So the king goes to g2. Yeah, there's really nothing for black here. Knight g6 threatens a fork, and Jacobson is allowing rook c2 on purpose because he will pick up the f5 pawn defending f2. And then he plays rook e6. Wow. Rook e6 is extremely strong, because rook h5 check is next. And that's going to force black to give up the bishop in order not to get checkmated. This game is over. Look, William Hoffman's clock is at 0.00. Has he lost on time? Has he resigned? He's completely lost. So since there are many rounds, many boards to look at, guys, and unfortunately it's not possible to look at all of the games. Uh, for this first round, we're focusing on the first 8 boards. And board number 8, Brian and Lin has won his game with the black pieces. This is a game where we looked at the opening only very briefly. We had a 4-knight Sicilian by transposition, where against bishop f4, so black plays e5. This is book. This is a really weird opening when we look at it for the first time, but there's a method to the madness. Black doesn't castle, but the knight on d6, black would love to see white move this knight 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times just to pick up a bishop that has not been developed. So this is what black wants out of the opening here. And white, if white accepts that, then not only does white get 0 advantage, but black might be the one with the upper hand because of the advantage in the tempo department. So e5 is played, and knight f5 check gains a tempo against the king. The king moves, and then the bishop goes to g5, pinning the knight, and this is all book. White would love to play the knight to d5 now, but then black goes and plays the bishop to b4 instead, pinning white's knight that was supposed to go to d5. That pretty much ensures that the domination of the d5 square is not going to happen. So queen to f3 and pawn to h6. Bishop takes and queen takes. I'm not a huge fan of the 4-knight Sicilian as black, and I don't like to play this type of position here. This looks weird for Brian, right? The opening went... I see that black won this game, but the opening doesn't look great. These are fantastic knights for white, and having the bishop there is not enough compensation for this. Knight e7, king to b1, and bishop takes c3. Queen takes c3. Knight takes f5 and d6. Still looks really difficult. Still looks very difficult for Brian. This king on f8 versus this king on b1 kind of like summarizes black's difficulties here. We've had g4 and h5. f3 and bishop d7. The queen goes to a3. So I was looking at this idea too of attacking the pawn on d6, but why not do it with the queen on b4, attacking b7 as well in the process? So we've had queen, but with this pawn under attack here, this is a bit of a nightmare for black because king e7 loses on the spot to g5. And it's impossible to keep the queen protecting d6. This is too much. Queen to e7, rook takes d6, and bishop to c6 here. And then pawn to g5. That's a super strong positional move. And this pawn is going to f6. How did Brian win this game? Black is so busted now. Black is so busted in this position. He played the king to g8 and then pawn to f6 and queen to c7. I'm super curious to see what happened here. This is untenable. There's no way. Like, white plays the bishop to c4 and the pawn to g6, exploiting this diagonal, and then opening up the g file for this rook too. That's impossible to defend. Black is completely lost here. Well, I mean, we'd have to figure out the tactics, and I don't know if bishop c4 specifically should be the move that should be played right now. Just because I'm thinking about bishop takes f3. But then check as a desperado. This is just crazy. I'm going to run an engine analysis on this position right here. So black plays the queen to c7. Okay, so the engine is giving white a 5.3 edge here. So we can confirm that Brian Lynn was completely lost. But the best move is not bishop c4. It's g6. The computer wants to play g6 first. And then in some lines, the bishop is going to c4. In some lines, the bishop is going to d3. But in every case, it's too much of an attack. And white's decision to play f takes g7 here was a big mistake, because after king takes g7, black's king can breathe a little and the rooks can communicate as well. So we've had queen to c5, rook he8, wow, it's hard to see where white's attack goes now. F takes g7 is pretty bad as an attacking move, because it's not an attacking move. It helps black's king and it helps black's rooks. It helps the opponent's position a lot. G6 would have been much stronger. And it looks like by the engine analysis here, bishop g4 wins and bishop d3 wins, and basically anything that you do that activates the pieces and prepares g6 is going to win. But taking on g7 led to a position where white's attack was over. Yeah, and black was able to regroup. Queen to d4 was a very smart move. Okay, now white is in trouble in the endgame, because if I trade the queens, then the e file being open like that greatly benefits black, and the f3 pawn is a huge weakness. And if I don't trade the queens, that's what happened in the game. Well, once the queens get traded anyway, and black's king goes to g6, and this pawn cannot be protected by either h4 or f4. Yeah, white's endgame is really bad. B3, king f4, and rook to d6. White wants to play rook f6 check now and pick up the f7 pawn. Black defends that with king g5 and then pawn to f5. Suddenly, the endgame is lost, because it's like black is up a piece. this type of endgame with this king being so active and this king being so passive, it's like white is down a piece. F5. So C4, king to F4, and rook to F6, and rook to G8. Wow, suddenly this is so lost for Ethan. This is painful. Asmer Cat. That's I'm gonna take that as as a good bit of fun. The answer is no. In my opinion, you should not leave wife and children and go for chess. And I don't think how talented any chess player is, I don't think leaving one's wife and children is ever warranted, no matter the talent. After b4, bishop takes f3, pawn to c5, and pawn to e4. This is so over. e3, rook e6, bishop e4 check. No problem. Bishop takes f5 and king takes f5. Yeah. So it's like Ethan's position was completely winning, and when it was when Ethan was going for tactics, everything was going swimmingly for him. The opening was a disaster for Black. Brian Lane was completely lost there. White's attack was way too strong, but you know, it's just like this cannot happen. Like Ethan is gonna have some thinking to do. Okay, just because when things go awry, and you know it can happen, we can make an inaccuracy while attacking, and suddenly the attack is over. Well, the attack was over, but his position was still there. His position was still playable, and it went from equal to completely lost for him way too quickly. Way too quickly. That's an indication that a player is on tilt a little bit. I don't know if that was exactly what happened with him, but that's usually the case in such situations. And let's take a look at board number 7, where Anthony Levin was playing an amazing game against FIDE Master Joshua Colas, and putting the heat on with the black pieces against a higher rated player. We had stopped on move 23 when White had brought all of his pieces to protect the d3 pawn like that, and Black continued with knight fd5. I had mentioned that rook a2 looked very good. It's really weird that Black doesn't play rook a2 here. It's like this move is really suggesting itself. Take a quick look at something in this game. We were not able to look at the pretty much any games other than top 8 boards for today there, friend. Just because there's so much action going on at the top 8 boards that really there's not enough time to cover every single one. Knight fd5, rook to d2, and bishop to f6. Bishop takes f6, knight takes f6. And then f5. Yeah. This I can pretty much guarantee was an inaccuracy. Knight d5, and then we have these trades in f5. It already feels like the worst has passed for white. Rook a2 is as good as it looks, for sure. It's one of those cases where the most obvious looking move is the one that should be played. Instead, black played rook a2 a few moves too late. It doesn't sting as much. We have f takes e6, f takes e6, and pawn to e4. Taking the d5 square away from black's knights. Rook takes d2, knight takes d2, and queen to c3. e5, queen d4, check, king to h1, check, king to g1, check. Wow, white was avoiding the draw, not black. I'm not really understanding what's going on here. So knight takes d3. Oh, if e takes f6, of course, check, and then queen takes d2 next. And with knight f3 and queen to g4, now there's knight f4. Queen g4 was a great move by Anthony here. That indirectly protects his f6 knight because of the knight fork on f4, which would win white's queen on e2. So king h1, knight to h5. Yeah. And then queen to e4. And black is going for it with knight takes g3 check. Takes and queen h3 check. King to g1 check, check, and knight f2. So weirdly, Colas did not want the draw by repetition earlier, and now he's got two knights against the rook, but black has 3 pawns and a much safer king, and this has to be lost. Queen to c6, pawn to h6. Check. That pawn is just a number. Where is it? Where is it? I don't know. It's not that simple, actually. It's actually not that simple. We've had rook takes d2, takes, queen takes c5. Yeah, this has become more of a difficult task. Check. I don't know exactly where this advantage slipped away, but this is not winning for black at all. Let's take a. This is not super eventful. We're probably gonna have a draw, really high likelihood. And then let's take a look at board number 1. a5 and king to d7. Let's take a look at Brendan. Well, actually, we don't have any new moves after rook e6, and white was completely winning there. Let's take a look at Andrew Tang. We had stopped on move 37 when he played the rook to h3, rook f1, and pawn to a6. Queen to e2 and rook to h2. Guys, white's position is so solid. Is so solid. What is Andrew Tang going to do here? He is a fantastic bullet player, but a fortress is a fortress. This is way too solid. Okay, so he's threatening bishop takes d4. That's easy to defend. The knight is always protecting f2. He's not going to stop trying. It doesn't look like it. Nor he should, because black's position is safe and clearly white is satisfied with the draw. But queen to e2, rook to h2. Yeah. He's trying to do some work, right? Yeah. Slutty type. I was like, is it even possible for black to win? Like, barring, of course, a blunder, a game-losing blunder. It's very difficult because white has two potential weaknesses, and the knight on d3 protects both. And it's very easy to keep the knight protected. So Andrew Tang keeps on playing because he's Andrew Tang. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if Andrew Tang had the white pieces here in the same position, he would also be trying to win. He's just being Andrew Tang. And James Marsh, of course, why don't they break their pawn structure? Well, what pawn breaks are there to make? The pawn structure, it's going to stay the way it is. It's really about the placement of the pieces. But Andrew Tang's ordeal here is that it doesn't matter what he tries unless there's something that can be done about white's knight on d3. How does he make progress? So queen takes d4 is now a threat, and it's gotten to a point where he's got to resort to the cheapos basically, and that's not. I don't think he's going to win. I would be extremely impressed, just because of how easy it is to play white's position. White has a fortress, and white can play fast, and as long as that knight is capped on d3, black is just not improving. by the looks of it, the final two games, Andrew Tang's and Joshua Colas's, both of these games are going to end in draws. Unless something really crazy happens. So you see, Andrew Tang moved the f7 pawn to f5. So the 50 move draw rule starts anew because a pawn move has been made. So a fortress slutty type by definition is when you have built up a defensive position that is so strong that there's nothing else that needs to be done. You can just go back and forth. You can just shuffle your pieces to the same squares while waiting for the opponent to demonstrate how he can make progress. And this is what has been built by James Marsh. At this point, it feels to me that Andrew Tang might be a little bit frustrated at this point. He is, when you have 500 rating points on your opponent, it doesn't really matter which color you're playing. You want the win. And but the fact is that James Marsh played a great game. He played a great game. Joshua Colas won. Wait. What? Andrew Tang won his game as well? I did not look because Amgar posted spoilers that I'm not going to click on that link. It says that Andrew Tang won. Okay, let's take a look at Colas's game first then, guys. How? Ooh. He found a way to play f4 here. He wants to answer g takes f4 with g3, and then queen takes c3 and takes that pawn. Let's take a look at Colas's game and how it ended to begin with. We should have had an endgame blunder, but endgame blunders are very common in queen endgames. Queen endgames are extremely difficult and volatile. And white did have a pawn on the 7th rank ready to promote, and black was trying to find a perpetual check at all times. This is where we had stopped. Queen f5 and queen e6. Still looked like there was nothing much that white could do. Queen a5, king f5, and king to b7. Okay, so he made a different move. Ooh. So what happened now was black made a blunder with queen b1 check, and then there were no more checks after king c7, and black resigned. So when you're defending an inferior queen endgame, you really must make it your business to give your checks in such a way that you keep the largest amount of future checks possible, be it vertically, horizontally, diagonally. And this is a cardinal sin of queen endgames, right? Just playing a check that was not well thought out, and then after just one move, the checks are over. Of course, this was the only check available, but there is queen f7 here, which attacks and pins the pawn. And I'm going to confirm this with the engines, but I would assume that White's king is exposed enough that this should still be a draw. That's usually the case. Okay, so I have the engines on, guys, and the engine confirms it's 0.00, but it seems to be extremely difficult. It has to be queen f7, and then check on c4 here, and then pinning the pawn with queen h4 is completely necessary. King to e8, check, and queen back to h4. And this is the absolute only way black can hold the draw. So it really had become extremely challenging. Queen h4. Just having fun talking about the Magnus Norway chess game with Fabi. I am not sure I recall that game. Was that a queen in game as well? Slutty, have a good night. Be here tomorrow for rounds number 2 and 3. Nice to have you with us. Yeah, and Joshua really did win. Wow, Andrew found a way forward. Wow, how good is Andrew Tang? Wow. Because if White captures in this way, and then we have g3 and queen takes g3, rook d2 is being threatened, and queen takes d4 is being threatened, and queen takes g3 is being threatened, and White is in a lot of trouble, apparently. So it looks like this was the right way to take it in this direction. Certainly not with the knight. Taking with the knight, allowing rook takes f2 has to be bad. So e takes f4, queen takes d4, queen to e2. And then bishop takes a3. Wow, that was... Finally, James Marsh fell for... thank you so much, Slutty. Thank you for that. Thank you. That's awesome. Bishop takes a3. Now White is really in trouble. He could not... He could not have fallen for that. He could not have fallen for that. Okay. Now Andrew is really dominating. We have queen takes g4, rook takes f2. Now White's king is very exposed. Rook f3, winning the knight is a threat. It's not even about the pawns. There is a 4 versus 1 pawn majority. There is a 1 pawn advantage. It's mostly about the exposure of the white king now. It's not about the pawn, it's about the king. Can I post a chess.com link of the Magnus game? That's completely okay by me. I don't understand what the rules are on Twitch though, if the link is going to be allowed, but I would personally welcome it. It doesn't look good for James Marsh to have allowed rook takes f2 here. Now this looks completely lost. Is it Is it that unacceptable to trade the queens? Can we trade the queens and play knight e5, attacking the bishop there? And then takes. White has a passed pawn too. If black plays rook takes f2, black loses because of e6, e7, and rook d8. Bishop takes e5, takes on e5. Then rook to h5. Yeah. It is really bad. If e6, rook e5, it is still really bad. Yeah, the game is over and Andrew Tang has indeed won. He is really amazing. This is certainly what was missed by James Marsh. Rook to f1. What a fantastic tactical shot. Black is going to be up a piece after rook takes f1, queen takes d3 check, followed by queen takes f1. Instead, queen g4 protecting the rook was played, and that allowed the check on d3, and white resigned. Wow. I must admit that I doubted the Tang man on this one. I did not think he was going to win at all. And he was able to make use of the only idea which he could possibly have had, which is to find a good moment to play f4. And he was able to do that, which is extremely, extremely impressive. So before we finish today's broadcast, guys, let's take a look at this critical moment here. Because queen d1 allowed f4. Why did it allow it? Knight takes f4 runs into rook takes f2. G takes f4 runs into g3. And e takes f4 runs into queen takes d4. So now that we know all of that, and it's easy to be an armchair quarterback with 20/20 hindsight the morning after the game. What can white do here that keeps the fortress and takes away from Andrew Tang his only resource? So basically, a move like queen to c3 protects d4. So if f4 is played, I'll take it with this pawn. And so there's nothing. I'll certainly not play queen to d2 because of bishop takes g3. So that's out of the question. But queen to c3 keeps the knight defended, and the trick was to keep d4 defended as well. And I don't see anything that black can possibly do. Maybe, but I don't think Andrew Tang would have accepted a draw even here, because the good thing about playing the black side of this position is that if he doesn't want to draw, if he wants to keep playing, he can do stuff like rook h7, rook to c7, king to a7, and then prepare some type of b6 and a5, and find a moment later on to try to push c5. That's on the menu for black. It's like black can, you see, like this is about practical play and creating practical chances to win. Just keep the game going, keep it tense, keep it alive. It was still possible for black to keep playing here. Although this has to be a complete 0.00 evaluation draw with adequate play. That is for sure. So this was the broadcast for the first round, guys. We're going to try to analyze as many games as we can per round But I don't want. It's not a good thing when the analyses are very thin and very superficial, and that's what would happen if we would look at every game. So we should definitely stick at the top boards. We just have to figure out like how many of the top boards. Even 8 feels like a stretch. But I'll have a good meeting with my tech team. I did struggle with the broadcast software today because the plan, and I'm sure we're going to be able to implement it from the second round onwards, which is going to be amazing. I've been looking forward to this tremendously, is actually to be able to talk to the players after the games. And to have the interviews. This adds like tremendous value. I've been looking forward to this so much. But we did have a few technical hiccups that we were not able to do that today, with the exception of like just one quick interview with Sahana. But we will definitely get that fixed because that has to happen. That's beautiful. I'm looking forward to that tremendously. So tomorrow we have round number 2 at 12 p.m. Eastern time, guys. And please be here because we're going to have an amazing day of chess tomorrow. Definitely going to be live here like for 8-9 hours from noon onwards, covering round number 2 and round number 3. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. We'll have a lot more chess tomorrow. I'll see you then.